Chapter 1303. The skeleton's bones were as hard as a sacred weapon, and they were sparkling with light. Not only were its claws hard, they were also extremely sharp. Traces of cold light were emitted, piercing into people's souls. It actually directly clashed with the little lowly's giant axe. It was truly earth-shattering. On the other hand, the little lowly waved her giant axe vigorously. Hundreds of millions of axe blades shot out, continuously strangling towards Muronyu. The frightening power impacted the space, causing it to tremble continuously. It seemed as if it would shatter at any moment. A black light rose from Muronyu's body, enveloping his entire body, resisting the impact of the shockwaves from the battle between the two. He narrowed his eyes as he looked at the skeleton's soul fire. He realized that although the soul fire of the skeleton was powerful, the skeleton did not seem to know how to use soul attacks. He only used ordinary attacks to fight the little lowly. In the battle, the soul fire trembled violently, as if it was a burning flame. Ga. In the battle, the skeleton kept laughing. Its laughter pierced through people's eardrums, and it was extremely unpleasant to hear. Smelly skeleton, your laughter is so unpleasant to hear. Die for me. The little lowly was extremely angry. The giant axe in her hand danced even more crazily. Waves of power burst out like a storm, chopping towards the skeleton. Dang! 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 The skeleton's hands quickly grabbed out, and the power that was strangling towards him exploded. Not only that, in the process of grabbing and exploding the power, claw shadows tore through the void, rapidly strangling towards the little lowly. However, what surprised Muronyu and the rest was that the little lowly seemed to have an extremely powerful energy shield around her body. Before the skeleton's attack could even get close to the little lowly, it was already blocked by this invisible energy. However, the impact caused ripples to appear on the little lowly's body. The little lowly was in an invincible position. It was precisely because of this that the little lowly was suppressed at the beginning. However, she gradually gained the upper hand. In the end, the skeleton was suppressed and continuously retreated, roaring in anger. Bang! Finally, the skeleton was careless, and its left chest was chopped by the little lowly's axe. After a burst of dazzling light, the skeleton was directly sent flying. During this process, a rib on the left side of the skeleton's chest was directly broken with a kacha sound. Little bitch, you're courting death. Skeleton steadied himself and clawed at his chest with both hands. In the next moment, a rib shining with holy light appeared in each of his hands. Then he leaped into the air, raised his two ribs in the air, and fiercely slashed down at the little lowly. Chi-chi! Two beams of black holy light shot out from his ribs and tore through the void. In the blink of an eye, they were right in front of the little girl. The speed was so fast that the little lowly didn't even have time to react. However, the little lowly's consciousness was very strong. After sensing the danger, she flipped her hand and blocked the giant axe in front of her. Boom! Boom! The two beams of black holy light struck the giant axe, and an earth-shattering sound erupted. In fact, the loud sound had even materialized and swept out in all directions, tearing the sky and splitting the earth. It was extremely terrifying. Whoosh! With a thought, Muronyu directly took out the Hichu Luo shoe. It floated above the girls' heads, and rays of yellow holy light fell down, protecting them firmly. On the other hand, Muronyu stood on the spot with the yin-yang cauldron above his head. He looked indifferently at the two people fighting in front of him. Humph! The little lowly groaned, and her body was sent flying like a broken rag doll. The skeleton laughed sinisterly and turned into a beam of light, pouncing towards the little lowly. However, Muronyu didn't make a move. He only looked indifferently in front of him. Ah, stinky skeleton, you dare to send me flying. You've angered me. I'll definitely kill you. The little lowly's figure swayed in the void before she steadied herself. However, the void behind her was smashed apart, causing large pieces of it to collapse. At the same time, the red holy light on the little lowly's body trembled violently. Rays of flame-like light burst out from her body. In the blink of an eye, the light had enveloped her entire body. Even Murong, you couldn't see her appearance. At the same time, more and more powerful aura burst out from her body and rushed in all directions like a torrent. In Murong Yu's eyes, the little lowly's power was becoming more and more intense. From the original low-rank undead realm, she quickly advanced to the high-rank undead realm, and then directly entered the undead realm. Finally, she reached the peak of the profound sage realm in one fell swoop, reaching the same level as the Bloodrain ancestor. At this time, the skeleton had already rushed in front of the little lowly. Each of his hands was holding a rib that looked like a sacred artifact. He laughed sinisterly and ruthlessly stabbed towards the little lowly. Red Moon Divine Slash. The little lowly roared fiercely. Along with her voice, the giant axe in her hand had already been chopped out rapidly. Suddenly, Murong Yu and the others saw a red crescent-shaped axe blade appear out of thin air. It tore through the void, locked onto the skeleton, and directly chopped towards him. At this moment, the skeleton, who bore the brunt of the attack, was shrouded in an incomparably strong aura of death. Even Murong Yu and the others in the distance felt the terror of the red moon axe blade. Asterisk schwa. Asterisk the skeleton was shocked and quickly retreated. At the same time, his hands shook and the two ribs burst out with holy light, fiercely chopping towards the red moon divine beheader. However, it was all in vain. With a chi sound, the two ribs that looked like sacred artifacts were directly cut off. However, the red moon divine beheader continued to chop forward without any hindrance. The skeleton was even more shocked in his heart. He knew how hard those two ribs were. They were the two hardest bones in his body and were comparable to high-rank sacred artifacts. However, they couldn't even withstand a single blow. He immediately lost the thought of resisting and quickly retreated. Although he was fast, the speed of the red moon divine beheader was faster. With a bang, the red moon divine beheader chopped the skeleton's entire body apart from his head, turning it into millions of fine powder. Only the head was left, slanting and escaping into the distance. Hateful, hateful. If I was at my peak, I could kill you ants with a flick of my finger. Hateful, really hateful. The skeleton roared. His voice was sharp and unpleasant to the ears. It was extremely resentful. Little lowly shouted softly, and her figure soared into the sky. The divine axe in her hand shattered the sky, and she was about to destroy the skeleton's head. However, at this moment, a large hand appeared out of thin air and directly grabbed the skeleton's head. This caused little lowly's giant axe to chop through the void. The skeleton was powerful, but it was only a skeleton, without a body. The skeleton's strength was less than 10% of its original strength. It was held in Murong Yu's hand and could not resist at all. However, in order to completely destroy the skeleton, his soul fire had to be extinguished. As long as the soul fire was not extinguished, the skeleton would not be truly destroyed. Moreover, the skeletons could gradually grow new bones. However, in order to reach its previous strength, it still needed a long time of bitter cultivation. When she saw that it was Murong Yu who had caught the skeleton, little lowly immediately exploded. Big bad guy, why did you save him? Are you his accomplice? Little lowly ran in front of Murong Yu, looking extremely furious. The giant axe in her hand emitted an extremely powerful wave. As long as Murong Yu's answer was wrong, the giant axe would immediately chop down. His soul fire is useful to me, Murong Yu said indifferently, and then his large hand immediately grabbed that huge soul fire. The soul fire trembled violently, and waves of terrifying waves spread in all directions. Don't kill me. I'll give you all my treasures. The skeleton was terrified and actually began to beg for mercy. Although his soul fire was powerful, it could not attack the soul. Otherwise, little lowly might not be his match. Murong Yu could even sense that the soul fire's power had already reached the level of 2 stars. If the skeleton was a soul saint, Murong Yu would not be his match at all. His soul would be easily obliterated by the skeleton. Your treasures? Murong Yu's face instantly darkened, and his eyes flashed with cold, killing intent. If it were not for these treasures, why would the Pang family sacrifice those young girls? Why do you sacrifice young girls every once in a while? Why young girls? Murong Yu was not in a hurry to make a move. Instead, he asked. He had thought about this question for a long time, but he could not find an answer. It's to repair my soul fire. As long as I devour their souls, my soul fire will become stronger and stronger. And the stronger the soul fire, the stronger my strength will be. In the end, I can even regrow my flesh and blood and return to my human form. The skeleton did not hesitate and immediately said, As for why young girls, it's because their souls are the purest, and they're the most helpful to me. Of course, if it's a soul saint soul, it will be even more beneficial. While speaking, Murong Yu felt the skeleton glance at him. It was obvious that the skeleton already knew that he was a soul saint. Damn it! After hearing this, little Loli shouted. Her small hands tightly grasped the handle of her axe, and she forcefully suppressed the anger in her heart. Sirs, I've been cultivating endlessly. Please let me go. I am willing to submit. The skeleton begged for mercy. Murong Yu smiled. Keep you alive to continue causing trouble? All right, your mission has been completed. You could die now. As he spoke, his large hand directly grabbed the skeleton's soul fire. The skeleton screamed, and then with a schwa sound, it disappeared from Murong Yu's palm. It had already been stored in the Hichu Luo Shu by Murong Yu. It was originally meant to be devoured, but with little Loli by his side, it was somewhat inconvenient. Moreover, they were still in this space, and the skeleton's treasures had yet to be collected. Chapter 1304. The space where the skeleton was located was huge, but it was not complicated. One could see the end of it at a glance. And because there was only the skeleton here, his treasures were just scattered in this space. One could see them at a glance. After killing the skeletons, Murong Yu and the others began to rummage through the treasures. In an instant, powerful and boundless auras began to erupt from the treasures. These were sacred tools that were rummaged through one by one, low-grade sacred tools, mid-grade divine tools, and even high-grade magic tools. In addition to these sacred tools, there were many sacred crystals. However, most of them were low-grade and mid-grade sacred crystals. There were not many high-grade sacred crystals. There were also many sacred medicines. However, they were all medicinal pills that replenished strength and healed injuries. There were no medicinal pills that could increase one's cultivation realm. Even if there were, they must have been used by the skeleton. Looking at the various sacred tools, heaven and earth treasures piled up like a small mountain in the corner of the space. Murong Yu was beaming with joy. Yu Mengqing, Gongsun Ningyu, Wen Yi, and the others were all smiling as they chose the sacred tools, medicinal pills, and so on that were suitable for them. As for Murong Yu, he had no use for the sacred tools, and those medicinal pills were even more useless. Murong Yu was also not interested in the other heaven and earth treasures, because the power contained in them was not huge. On the other hand, the power contained in those high-grade sacred tools was extremely huge, but they were divided among Yu Mengqing and the others. They had just ascended to the holy world and had nothing on them. Murong Yu did not have the nerve to snatch it from them. On the other hand, the little Loli just looked at those treasures with disdain. She did not even give them a second glance. Perhaps these treasures were not enough to enter her eyes. This made Murong Yu even more certain that her background was not simple. However, this little girl was very tight-lipped. No matter how Murong Yu inquired, she did not reveal the slightest bit. Take this opportunity to recognize the sacred tool as its master and familiarize yourself with its power. I'll go cultivate first. After everyone had chosen their treasures, Murong Yu could not wait to enter the Hichu Luoshu world. He had been itching to devour the skeleton's soul fire for a long time. Moreover, the news of his appearance in the Left Origin City had already spread out. Most likely, the experts of the Sky Flame City were already waiting in the Left Origin City. If he still had the same strength as before, Murong Yu could only escape. Therefore, he wanted to increase his strength as much as possible. Humph! Seeing Murong Yu vanish into thin air without him noticing anything, he was shocked. The little loli couldn't help but coldly snort. She was very unhappy in her heart. She also guessed that Murong Yu must have entered the space treasure within the He Tu and the Luo Shu. The soul fire of the skeleton suppressed by Murong Yu was still frantically darting left and right in an attempt to escape. Little bastard, let me out of here. Otherwise, once I escape from here, I'll exterminate your 9 generations. Seeing Murong Yu striding over, the skeleton's soul fire was in a frenzy. It roared hysterically at Murong Yu. Waves of terrifying soul fluctuations spread out in all directions like a tide. You're about to die, yet you still want to know your own limits. How ridiculous! Murong Yu sneered. His big hand suddenly stretched out and grabbed the air. Instantly, the huge ball of soul fire was sucked into his hand. In the next moment, the incomparably violent, chaotic soul fire rushed out like a torrent and directly drowned the soul fire. Under Murong Yu's control, the chaotic soul fire did not strangle the soul fire. Instead, it quickly penetrated it and searched for the skeleton's soul consciousness that had been directly annihilated in the soul fire. Ah, little bastard, you'll die a horrible death. The skeleton screamed crazily. At the same time, it was constantly begging, cursing, and even cursing. However, Lin Fan was indifferent to it. Not to mention that the skeleton was originally full of evil. Even if it was not Murong Yu, he would not be soft-hearted. Under the impact of Murong Yu's powerful chaotic soul fire, the skeleton's soul consciousness was quickly annihilated. In less than an hour, the skeleton's soul consciousness was completely annihilated. However, Murong Yu did not immediately devour the soul fire. One must know that this soul fire had gradually grown to such a powerful level after devouring the souls of countless young girls. At the same time that the skeleton's soul consciousness was annihilated, Murong Yu felt that this soul fire was filled with countless messy memories. In addition to the skeleton's own memories, there was a large amount of memories of those who had been devoured by it. There was no problem with the skeleton's soul fire for now. However, if he continued to devour, even if the soul fire became stronger, it would eventually become deranged. In the end, the soul fire would explode. After using a total of 3 days, Murong Yu finally wiped out all the memories in the soul fire. At the same time, he refined the soul fire. However, the soul fire had become much smaller. It was only about the size of a fist. However, it had become much purer. Devour. With a thought, Murong Yu's soul, which was exactly the same as him, opened its mouth and devoured the soul fire. At the same time, Murong Yu sat down cross-legged and began to refine the soul fire. The pure soul did not resist at all and was quickly refined by Murong Yu. As a result, Murong Yu's soul power began to increase rapidly. Ka. Formless barriers were broken one after another, and they gradually approached the 2-star soul spirit. However, in this process, the soul power was also rapidly depleting. There are a total of 9 stars in the soul. Could it be that every star is divided into several levels? While refining the soul fire, Murong Yu's heart flashed with a trace of doubt. The soul-devouring beast once told him that the soul was divided into 9 levels from 1 star to 9 stars. It did not say that there were levels in every star. However, Murong Yu had already broken through 4 barriers in a row. 5 barriers, 6 barriers, 7 barriers. After Murong Yu broke through 7 barriers, his realm stopped. However, the soul fire still had close to half of the soul power. One could imagine how terrifying the soul power contained in the soul fire was. One could imagine how many souls the skeleton had devoured to have such a huge amount of soul power. At this moment, Murong Yu felt that his soul was trapped by a huge, invisible barrier. He knew that this was the barrier to the 2-star soul. As long as he broke through this barrier, his soul could reach the 2-star soul realm. If he could not break through, his soul could only stop here. 9 levels of 1 star. This was Murongyu's current soul realm. Break through to the next realm. Morongyu took a deep breath and began to break through the realm. However, breaking through the realm of the soul realm was more difficult than he expected. Once, twice, 10 times. He failed 10 times in a row. At this moment, the soul fire was less than 30% of its original power. At most, I can break through a few more times. If I continue to fail, I can only break through again in the future. Morongyu muttered in his heart, but did not stop breaking through the realm. Kacha, after an unknown amount of time, a loud sound came from Murongyu's soul space. Then, the huge barrier that had trapped him for a long time was finally broken through by him in one go. Rumble. The moment he broke through the realm, Murongyu's soul expanded rapidly. A powerful and vast aura was constantly emitted from his soul body, instantly filling the entire soul space. Under the impact of the soul power, Murongyu's soul space expanded rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the soul space had expanded to 10 times its original size. However, after expanding to 10 times, the soul space stopped expanding. "This is?" Morongyu suddenly exclaimed. Originally, the soul was suspended in the soul space. But at this time, there was a deep pit below the soul. The deep pit was not big, about 100 meters in radius. After the deep pit appeared, a stream of spring water gushed out from the bottom of the deep pit. As more and more spring water gushed out, the soul power in Murongyu's soul space became less and less. Finally, under the stunned gaze of Murongyu, the spring water quickly filled up the deep pit. At the same time, the spiritual energy that had filled Murongyu's spiritual space also disappeared without a trace. So, the deep pit became a small pool. "What's going on?" Murongyu was stunned. But soon he was surprised. This water is actually liquid soul power? Soul power, which was the original soul chaos fire. But at this time, it had turned into liquid. At this time, Murongyu's soul shook slightly, and the previously inflated body quickly shrank to its original size, and then sat directly in the pool. How terrifying is the power of the liquefied soul power! Murongyu's mind moved, and the soul power in the pool immediately rushed into a water dragon. The water dragon roared and immediately shot out from Murongyu's soul space, appearing in the Hichu Luo Shu. Boom! After an earth-shattering explosion, the He-Tu and the Luo Shu instantly exploded. A terrifying power that shocked the soul blasted out, sweeping in all directions. Wherever it passed, large swaths of the void would collapse. Morongyu was shocked. At this time, the power of the soul power was at least 100 times or even hundreds of times of the previous soul chaos fire. Moreover, the attack range is several times more than before. It has far exceeded the power of a high-level undead realm expert. Even the existence of the peak of the undead realm can be easily killed. Murongyu's face showed shock and joy. After testing the power of the soul power, Murongyu's mind quickly returned to the soul space. He wanted to figure out what the pool was. This is called the soul pool. It will only appear when one reaches the 2-star soul realm. As the soul continues to strengthen, the soul pool will also continue to expand and finally transform into a soul lake, soul sea. Before Murongyu had time to ask, the voice of the soul-devouring beast appeared in his mind. Chapter 1305. Soul Pond, Soul Lake, and Soul Sea. Murongyu was stunned for a moment before he reacted. Wasn't the puddle in the soul space exactly like small pond? A pond of liquid soul energy meant that the soul energy was at least 100 times stronger than before. Furthermore, the soul energy wasn't condensed enough. As one's strength increased, the soul energy in the soul pond would gradually condense and compress. When that happened, the soul energy would become stronger and stronger. Once the soul pool evolved into a soul lake or soul sea, the power of the soul would be even more powerful and almost limitless. Murongyu muttered to himself as his eyes flickered. Soul-devouring beast. What's the difference between the soul pond, soul lake, and soul sea? What realm or how big the soul pond needs to be considered a soul lake? Murong suppressed his excitement and asked the soul-devouring beast. It varies from person to person. For some people, a radius of 1 mile is considered a soul lake. But for others, a radius of 100 miles is still a soul pond. The stronger one's talent, the bigger their soul pond, soul lake, and soul sea, and vice versa. Murong is still confused. Since it varies from person to person, how do you know if you're still a soul pond or have a breakthrough into a soul lake? It's very simple. As long as you condense and compress the soul in your soul pond to 10,000 times its current size, no matter how big your soul pond is, it will evolve into a soul lake. 10,000 times? That doesn't seem very difficult. Murong pondered for a moment before saying with a smile. The soul-devouring beast also smiled. If that's what you think, then you're very wrong. If the soul pond is only this big, it's very easy to compress it to 10,000 times its original size without any change or increase in soul energy. However, as your strength increases, your soul pond will gradually grow bigger and your soul energy will also increase. It's somewhat difficult to condense and compress all of your soul energy to 10,000 times its original size. However, if you evolve from a soul pond to a soul lake, the power of your soul energy will increase by at least 100 times. It varies from person to person. Murong's eyes flashed as he smiled. No matter how difficult it is, I will condense and compress it. This was one of his methods to increase his strength. No matter how difficult it was, he had to do it. After all, cultivators were supposed to defy the heavens and face difficulties head-on. Murong's expression changed slightly when he sensed the surging soul energy in the soul pool. Then, a smile appeared on his face. The improvement of my soul actually loosened my cultivation and made a breakthrough. As he spoke, Murong had already sat down cross-legged on the ground. His mind had already sunk into his body as he began to break through to the next realm. He had already reached the second step of the Great Sage realm. Along with the breakthrough of his Soul Star rank, the barrier to the Great Sage third level had been quietly broken through. Now, Murong only needed enough power to break through to the third order Great Sage realm. Power! After Murong sat down cross-legged, he smiled bitterly. How could he possibly have enough strength to break through to the next realm? Thus, with a thought, his big hand suddenly reached out. Outside, in the space of the skeleton, Yu Mengqing and the others were recognizing the sacred artifacts that they had just chosen as their masters. The sacred artifacts and various treasures that they had not chosen were scattered and piled up in the corner of the space like small mountains. Suddenly, a big hand appeared out of thin air and grabbed the sacred artifacts that had piled up into a small mountain. Little Lolita, who was resting with her eyes closed, reacted immediately. She clenched her small hand and almost chopped down with her huge axe. However, the moment she made her move, Murong's voice rang in her ears. Little Lolita snorted and closed her eyes again. This was because Murong had told her that he needed to refine these sacred artifacts to break through. If Murong had been a step slower and told little Lolita, she would have chopped down with her axe. Chaos Furnace Refine. Murong grabbed a bunch of sacred artifacts of various grades and threw them all into the Chaos Furnace. Then, with a thought, the Chaos Furnace trembled slightly, and those lower and middle sacred artifacts were immediately refined into pure energy and poured into Murong's body. Suddenly, Murong's strength skyrocketed. In a short while, he reached the peak of the second stage Great Sage and finally broke through to the third stage Great Sage. However, after the breakthrough, it did not stop. An incomparably huge amount of energy continued to pour into Murong's body. Soon, he reached the peak of the third stage Great Sage. I should be able to break through to the fourth stage Great Sage. Feeling the crumbling barrier of the realm, Murong's face revealed a smile. However, his face soon became gloomy. This was because the energy of the sacred artifacts that had been refined by the chaos furnace had been completely consumed by him. Those were half of Skeleton's sacred artifacts. I can still get sacred artifacts, but if I miss this opportunity, I don't know when I'll be able to break through to the 4th stage Great Sage. Murong clenched his teeth and reached out his hand again. Hichu Luoshu grabbed the remaining sacred artifacts and even the other natural treasures into the chaos furnace. Big Meanie needs to refine so many sacred artifacts to break through. What realm does he need to reach? The undead realm? Or the imperishable realm? Even the imperishable realm doesn't need so much energy, right? The little Loli opened her eyes, full of confusion. Although Murong did not tell her about the chaos furnace, with her knowledge, she naturally knew that Murong directly refined these sacred artifacts to increase his realm. Although there were few people who refined sacred artifacts to increase their strength, it was not impossible. In fact, anyone could use this method to increase their cultivation. However, the prerequisite was that you could refine these sacred artifacts. The little Loli knew an expert who used this method to increase his strength. However, that person did not need so much energy, and the refining speed was extremely slow. Of course, it was equivalent to absorbing the energy of heaven and earth to cultivate. That person's cultivation speed was much faster. However, compared to Murong, that person paled in comparison. The little Loli's face was full of curiosity as she looked at the endless void. She wanted to know how Murong refined these sacred artifacts so quickly. In what realm did he need so much energy to break through? However, she did not even know where Hichu Luoshu was. In the end, she could only leave it as it was. Rumble. A loud sound like a mountain collapsing came from Murong's body. In the next moment, an incomparably powerful aura erupted from his body, causing the void around him to collapse and spread in all directions. 4th-stage Great Sage, I finally broke through. My strength is at least 10 times greater than when I was a 3rd-stage Great Sage, and 100 times greater than when I was a 2nd-stage Great Sage. Murong's face was full of smiles. However, even so, he did not stop cultivating. He quickly refined the remaining sacred artifacts, heavenly treasures, and other things, and then directly pushed his realm to the peak of the 4th-stage Great Sage. He was only one step away from breaking through to the 5th-stage Great Sage. However, although he could see the barrier to the 5th-stage Great Sage, the barrier did not loosen. If he wanted to break through it by force, he would need an extremely powerful impact. But now, Murong was clear once again. He did not have any sacred artifacts or the like on him to cultivate. Moreover, he had a faint feeling in his heart that if he wanted to break through the barrier to the 5th-stage Great Sage, he would need at least a high-grade sacred artifact or a power equivalent to that level. As for low-grade and mid-grade sacred artifacts, he estimated that refining too many of them would not allow him to break through. Sighing, Murong's heart sank again, and he began to consolidate his cultivation. Although it was a pity, he had already broken through 2 small realms. His soul had also broken through to the 2-star realm, and he had condensed his soul pool. Excluding soul attacks, Murong's current strength was comparable to a mid-level Undying Realm expert. If soul attacks were included, he was invincible in the Undying Realm. Even if he faced a low-level Undying Realm expert, he had the ability to kill them. At the very least, he would have no problem protecting himself. After a long time, Murong completely consolidated his cultivation and realm. Then he stepped out of the Hichu Luoshu with a smile on his face. Peak of the 4th-stage Great Sage. After Murong appeared, he discovered that Mengqing and the others had successfully recognized the sacred artifacts as their masters. At this time, they were chatting enthusiastically with little Loli and the others. When Murong appeared out of thin air, little Loli immediately discovered his existence. Then she cried out in surprise. "You broke through 2 small realms?" Mengqing and the others looked at Murong with smiles on their faces. However, little Loli's next sentence made them, and Murong Yu's smile freeze. You only broke through 2 small realms after refining so many sacred artifacts and heavenly treasures? Are you a good-for-nothing? Murong Yu's face suddenly darkened. What are you talking about? If you're not a good-for-nothing, then you're too useless. After refining so many sacred artifacts, most of the power has been wasted, right? Otherwise, why did you only break through 2 small realms? Little Loli looked at Murong Yu with disdain. She was just short of mocking him. But now, it was no different from mocking him. Murong Yu's face darkened. He didn't waste any power, but he was too lazy to explain. He had no topic with little Loli. Thus, he waved his hand and rushed out of the tunnel that he came in from. Humph! Little Loli snorted coldly and followed. She was the second to leave this space. Big bad guy, you have to be careful. At the exit, just as Murong Yu was about to leave here and return to Zhuiyuan City, little Loli suddenly said with a smile. Murong Yu looked at little Loli in confusion. Before I came in, I saw some people stronger than you searching for you in Zhuiyuan City. It seemed to be some Skyfire City or something. They should be waiting for you in the Pang family now. It's like catching a turtle in a jar. Murong Yu's face changed slightly. Then he sneered. They want to kill me? We don't know who will kill who. Near the Pang family, a mid-level expert suddenly erupted with a terrifying aura. A tremendous force coiled around his body, rapidly circulating. A terrifying aura spread out in all directions. 6th level undying stage. He had finally broken through. Murong Yu, you little bastard, let's see where you can escape to this time. Li Chong slowly stood up, his face full of resentment. Under the stimulation of the death of his 2 brothers and his inability to take revenge, the realm that he had been unable to break through for a long time actually broke through. Did they come out? Murong Yu, let's see how you're going to die. Li Chong sneered. He took a step forward and flew towards the Pang family. Whoosh, whoosh. 2 figures shot out of the transmission array and appeared in the line of sight of the Pang family's disciples. Countless disciples of the Pang family who had heard the news looked at Murong Yu and the little Loli in a daze. Each and every one of them had a puzzled look on their faces. After waiting for a long time, the light of the transmission array disappeared, but the ancestors of the Pang family still hadn't come out. What's going on? Everyone in the Pang family had a bad feeling in their hearts. Each and every one of them glared at Murong Yu and the little Loli. At the same time, they looked at the little Loli. Many people of the Pang family saw Murong Yu and Pang Jinny go in together. However, they didn't see the little Loli go in. This was because they were all very curious about where the little Loli had come from. Moreover, the little Loli carrying the giant axe was too shocking. The visual impact was so strong that it was impossible not to notice her. Murong Yu, where are our ancestors? An undead elder guarding the Pang family stepped forward with a gloomy face and questioned loudly. Murong Yu glanced at the countless disciples of the Pang family and smiled. The ancestors of the Pang family and the city lord are both dead. At the same time, they told me that they died very happily. They told you not to avenge them and to quickly disband the Pang family and the city lord's mansion. Impudent! An angry roar came, and a high-level undead expert stepped out from the distant sky. His expression was ice-cold, and his whole body was brimming with killing intent. He was an expert of the city lord's mansion. After hearing the news that Pang Jinny and the others were coming out, he rushed over and just happened to hear Murong Yu's words. You killed them? The high-level undead expert of the city lord's mansion came to the sky above the Pang family and looked down at Murong Yu with a scrutinizing gaze. Murong Yu's smile didn't fade, but he was already somewhat unhappy in his heart. However, he still smiled and said, I'm just a great saint. How could I have the strength to kill the 2 of them? They weren't killed by me. Fine, I'll tell you the truth. That powerful existence wasn't satisfied with the sacrifices they had made over the years and swallowed the 2 of them as sacrifices. Nonsense. You must have schemed to kill the city lord. Little bastard, You dare to kill the city lord of the Nine, Holy Nation? You will be hunted down by the Nine, Holy Nation. The high-level undead expert of the city lord's mansion shouted coldly. At the same time, he slapped down at Murongyu, wanting to kill Murongyu. A cold light flashed in Murongyu's eyes. Just as he was about to attack, the little lowly beside him rushed into the sky. Do you think you are the Nine, Holy Nation's holy lord? Shameless boasting, eat my axe. With a shout, the little lowly rushed towards the high-level undead expert. The giant axe in her hand had already shattered the void, and like a waterfall, it swept through billions of space-time, carrying a terrifying heaven-rending and earth-rending holy light as it poured down on the high-level undead expert. The high-level undead expert was taken aback. The big hand that was originally slapping at Murongyu flipped in the void and slapped at the giant axe, tearing through the void. However, puff, his big hand was like a piece of tofu, unable to withstand a single blow, and was directly cut off by the giant axe. The high-level undead expert was scared half to death, and his figure instantly exploded. Although he was fast, the giant axe was faster. Therefore, under the shocked eyes of everyone, the body and soul of the high-level undead expert of the city lord's mansion were directly split in half by the giant axe. The high-level undying realm expert had died, completely unable to withstand a single blow. Seeing this scene, the experts of the Pang family who were about to attack were all shocked. Therefore, one by one, they secretly withdrew their power and kept retreating. One by one, they looked at the little lowly in the void with fear in their eyes. Ugh! At this time, Li Chong happened to appear in the void, not far from the Pang family. After seeing this scene, he was directly frightened and did not dare to take half a step forward. When did Murongyu have such a powerful expert by his side? Li Chong, Li Di, and even the experts of Skyfire City flashed through the minds of Li Chong, Li Di, and even the experts of Skyfire City. A high-level undead expert was killed by her axe, with my strength. Li Chong's face was very unsightly. After the breakthrough, his confidence soared, and he felt that he could kill Murongyu. As long as Murongyu did not use Broken Finger, he would die without a doubt. But now he shrank back. Undead realm, definitely not undead realm. She could easily kill a high-level undead expert. Is this axe an ancestral weapon? Unlike Li Chong, Li Di was not frightened. Instead, he looked at the huge axe in the little lowly's hand with greedy eyes. It's at least a saint-rank sacred weapon, maybe even an ancestral weapon. When did Murongyu have such a person by his side? The experts from Heavenly Flame City looked through the void at Murongyu's direction. When they saw the little lowly kill a high-level undying realm expert with a single swing of her axe, they were only slightly surprised. After all, they were much stronger than Murongyu and the others. In their eyes, a battle between people of Murongyu's level was nothing more than a child's play. Those things on Murongyu's body might not have much to do with us. But this axe... Another person's eyes flashed with cold light as he looked through the void at the huge axe in the little lowly's hand. Hold on, I seem to have heard of this little girl somewhere. She looks like a little lowly, dressed in fiery red, holding a huge axe. The leader of Skyfire City stopped the people who were about to attack and frowned. I remember, some time ago, could she be... An expert of Skyfire City suddenly changed his expression. They retreated? After Murongyu came out, his enormous divine mind had already enveloped the entire left origin city. After his soul broke through to 2 stars and formed the soul pool, his divine mind had become even larger. Even the super powerhouses of Skyfire City did not discover his divine sense. At this moment, he saw that the experts who were about to make a move had quietly retreated. Is it because of the little lowly? Murongyu frowned slightly. Although he covered them with his divine mind, he did not eavesdrop, so he did not know what they were talking about. However, it was good that the experts of Skyfire City had retreated. Then there was no need to waste the power of Broken Finger. As for Li Di and Li Chong, these two were like followers. Murongyu did not intend to let them go. Therefore, Li Chong, who was slowly retreating, suddenly found that Murong Yu was looking at him with a smile. A bad feeling surged in Li Chong's heart. With a thought, his figure flashed, and he retreated. Li Chong, since you're here, don't leave. I'll send you to reunite with your two brothers. Murong Yu laughed. At the same time, he rose into the air and approached Li Chong. Chapter 13:07. Li Chong's face suddenly changed, and his figure suddenly sped up, fleeing without fighting. He was still quite afraid of Murong Yu, not only because Murong Yu used the power of Broken Finger. Even a super powerhouse of the profound sage realm could be easily killed, let alone him, a mid-rank undead saint. Even if Broken Finger had exhausted its power and could not be used anymore, Murong Yu was still a soul saint. Back then, his soul was almost destroyed by Murong Yu. In addition to these two reasons, Murong Yu still had Little Lowly by his side. If Little Lowly was not pleasing to the eye and chopped down with her axe, he would not be able to resist at all. Therefore, he could only choose to escape now. Although this was a bit aggrieved, and he could not even avenge his two younger brothers in the future, he did not want to die here. However, no matter how fast he was, Murong Yu was even faster. Li Chong only saw a blur in front of him, and a figure appeared in front of him. At the same time, a huge fist blasted the void and quickly rushed over with lightning speed. The fist erupted with a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth, and it quickly enlarged in his pupils. By the time he reacted, it had already rushed in front of him. Li Chong was taken aback. He took a step forward, but he was already standing in the void. But in addition to being shocked, he was also very happy, because Murong Yu did not use the power of Broken Finger. Without using Broken Finger, or even Soul, how could a mere 4th rank great saint be his opponent, who had reached the 6th rank of the undead realm? With a thought, Li Chong's power had been raised to the extreme. Instantly, a violent and terrifying aura erupted from his body and swept out in all directions like a tidal wave. The terrifying power suppressed the entire left origin city. The souls of many saints who had not reached the undead realm trembled, and a feeling of irresistible arose in their hearts. At the same time, Li Chong's stormy wave-like power was divided into two parts. One part rushed into the soul space, wrapping his soul layer by layer to protect it. It was to prevent Murong Yu's soul attack. Most of the remaining power surged into his right fist. Instantly, his fist rapidly enlarged, and an incomparably terrifying aura erupted from it. "Little bastard, die!" Li Chong sneered and shouted. His fist, which contained 90% of his strength, suddenly punched out. He actually wanted to punch Murong Yu to death. In the blink of an eye, their fists had already collided. Boom! After an earth-shattering boom, a terrifying impact swept out from where the two fists collided. Tiny cracks were torn in the surrounding void, spreading rapidly in all directions. At the same time, Murong Yu and Jian Wushuang turned into two streaks of light and shot backward. What? The two of them actually tied. Seeing this scene, Li Di's jaw dropped to the ground, and he couldn't help but exclaim. Murong Yu and his companion were both sent flying by the terrifying impact. Li Chong felt as if he had been smashed by an incomparably huge sacred mountain. Although his arm was not blown up, he knew that his bones had been shattered and the blood vessels in his body had burst. The power in his body was even more turbulent from the impact. His whole body was torn apart as if it was about to be torn apart. In the process of retreating, he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. On the other hand, Murong Yu was also sent flying. However, he didn't seem to be injured. In fact, Murong Yu was really not injured. After breaking through to the 4th level of the Great Sage, he had the power to fight with an intermediate undead realm powerhouse. Although Li Chong had reached the 6th level of the undead realm, he was still in the intermediate undead realm, although his strength was stronger than Murong Yu's by a bit. But don't forget that Murong Yu's body had reached the level of a low-grade sacred tool. Just this alone offset Li Chong's excess power, the power of a small realm. He even had the upper hand. After the ocean-like life force in his body washed over, Yu's body once again recovered to its peak state. Although his blood was still turbulent, he could already fight again. Therefore, he took a step forward and then disappeared from the spot with a teleport. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Li Chong. Thousand Army Elephant Drawing Fist. Li Chong's face changed drastically. Yu's attack was too fast. From the time they were both sent flying to the time he rushed over, it was less than 2 seconds. In such a short time, Li Chong didn't have the magical power of life force. The injury on his right hand couldn't be healed in time. Moreover, he didn't even have time to suppress the turbulent power in his body. In a panic, he could only gather the power that could be raised in his left hand and punched out again. At the same time, he had already used his fastest speed to retreat. Boom! Both fists quickly bombarded together again. This time, Yu's body only swayed a little. However, Li Chong's left hand, which had been caught off guard, was smashed to smithereens. However, it successfully blocked the impact of Yu's fist. Otherwise, Yu's fist would have smashed into his body. With his current strength, he couldn't block the power of Yu's fist at all. He would be directly blown up. Intermediate Undying Realm is just SOSO. See how I blow you up? Yu laughed. His figure swayed, and he attacked again. Swish! A golden light shot out from Li Chong's body, and it expanded with the wind. It was a huge iron hammer. The iron hammer was dazzling with golden light, emitting billions of golden rays. It was a middle-grade holy weapon. It was as if an invisible hand was holding the giant hammer. The giant hammer, exuding waves of terrifying power, shook violently in the void. Then, the hammer broke the void and smashed down on Yu's head. Although Li Chong was already seriously injured, he had already activated the power of this middle-grade, holy weapon to the extreme. The power that erupted was equivalent to that of an advanced, undying realm expert. All the hairs on Yu's body stood on end. With his current strength, he couldn't take the giant hammer head-on. The result of taking it head-on was that he would be blown up by the giant hammer. Therefore, his figure swayed, and he disappeared on the spot. Even though the giant hammer was controlled by Li Chong's mind couldn't find Yu's location. Therefore, the giant hammer couldn't smash down on Yu. In the end, it only hit the void, and the void was blown up. Teleport! Yu teleported to avoid the attack of the giant hammer. He appeared in front of Li Chong out of thin air and punched out again. Li Chong was shocked. His mind controlled the giant hammer to smash the void and quickly smash down. However, how could the speed of the giant hammer compare to Yu's attack speed? As soon as the giant hammer moved, Yu had already punched Li Chong. Terrible and unparalleled power poured out from Yu's fist, pouring into Li Chong's body like a torrent. Suddenly, Li Chong's body, which was just an ordinary holy body, began to shatter inch by inch. In the end, it exploded with a boom, and a cloud of blood mist exploded in the void. Yu is so powerful. In the distance, Li Di's eyes narrowed slightly, looking at Yu with cold eyes. He didn't want to intervene in the battle between Yu and Li Chong. Anyway, no matter who won, the benefits would eventually fall on him, because he was a profound sage. Whoosh! The giant hammer tore through the void with a terrible aura that could destroy heaven and earth. However, Yu disappeared again after smashing Li Chong's body, causing the giant hammer to miss again. At this time, Li Chong's body condensed again. However, his power had been consumed a bit, and his strength was no longer at its peak. He couldn't even reach rank 4 of the undead realm. Li Chong's eyes were full of horror. He didn't expect Yu's cultivation to be so terrifying. He was at rank 6 of the undead realm, which was 11 small realms higher than Yu. Run! At this moment, Li Chong only had this thought, and he had already put into action. He controlled the giant hammer to float above his head, turned into a stream of light, and fled into the distance. However, Yu had already decided to kill him. How could he let him escape? Therefore, when he moved, he rushed up again in an instant. However, with the giant hammer's protection, Yu couldn't get close to him in a short time. If that's the case, I'll break your turtle shell." Murong Yu sneered in his heart. Murong Yu increased his strength to the maximum. He didn't perform any moves, but he kept throwing out elephant-drawing fist. Boom, 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 one after another, incomparably huge phantoms of fists shot out from Murong Yu's fists. They tore through the void and violently bombarded Li Chong's giant hammer. In the blink of an eye, Murong Yu had sent out 100,000 punches. Every punch was Murong Yu's strongest attack. In the beginning, Li Chong could easily block it. However, the frequency of Murong Yu's attacks became faster and faster. In the end, when Murong Yu's tens of thousands of punches gathered into a single punch, he couldn't block it anymore. Puff, blood spurted out, and cracks began to appear all over Li Chong's body like a spider web. Blood spurted out from the cracks, and it was a ghastly sight. "Little bastard, I'll kill you." Perhaps knowing that he couldn't escape, Li Chong's eyes were filled with determination. Then, his body began to expand rapidly, and the aura on his body became more and more violent. "Self-destruct," Murong Yu sneered. "With me around, it'll be difficult for you to self-destruct." As he spoke, he raised his level again, and the frequency of his punches increased. When Murong Yu threw out 10 million punches, Li Chong's body had already expanded into a giant ball. However, he couldn't withstand Murong Yu's attacks anymore. Murong Yu's punch landed on the giant hammer. The violent force rushed into Li Chong's body. In the next moment, after a loud boom, Li Chong's body exploded. Chapter 1308. This attack contained an enormous amount of Murong Yu's spiritual energy. Therefore, the moment Li Chong's physical body exploded, his soul was already wrapped up by Murong Yu's soul power and swept into Murong Yu's soul space. With just a thought, Murong Yu refined Li Chong's soul and then devoured it. It became a tonic for his soul. After reaching a 2-star soul, the speed of refining an ordinary soul was several times faster than when it was a 1-star soul. He died just like that. Seeing Li Chong being blown up by Murong Yu, everyone was shocked. That was a mid-level undead realm expert, and the power of that mid-level sacred weapon was equivalent to that of a high-level undead realm expert. How terrifying was Murong Yu's strength? Some people even noticed that the giant hammer that had fallen to the ground because of Li Chong's death had many tiny cracks that were almost invisible. The cracks were densely distributed on the hammer like a spider web, which was a shocking sight. Even a mid-level sacred weapon was blown up. Seeing this, Li Di's pupils suddenly shrank. If he continues to grow, won't I be no match for him when he reaches the undead realm? No, this person must be eliminated. Li Di's face darkened, and his eyes flickered with hatred like a poisonous snake. With a wave of his hand, the mid-level sacred weapon that originally belonged to Li Chong, but because of Li Chong's death, it had become an ownerless object. With just a glance, Murong Yu shook his head. Unfortunately, it's only a mid-level sacred weapon. Otherwise, it should be able to raise my realm. Murong Yu's voice was not loud, but everyone present was a saint. They could hear even the slightest sound clearly. Therefore, after hearing his words, many people want to beat him up. A mid-level sacred weapon. Do you think it's an ordinary soldier? How many people in the undead realm, and even the undead realm, could only use a mid-level sacred weapon? In fact, some of them didn't even have a low-grade saint artifact. However, what they didn't know was that the power Murong Yu needed to break through was too terrifying. Although the power contained within a mid-grade sacred artifact was considerable, it was incapable of increasing Murong Yu's cultivation base, no matter how much it increased. Not only was there a difference in quantity, there was also a difference in quality. The energy contained within a medium-grade saint artifact was inferior to a high-grade saint artifact in both quantity and quality. If a middle-grade sacred weapon was compared to a self-cultivator's vital essence, then the power contained in a high-grade sacred weapon was the immortal vital essence of a saint. The difference between the two was obvious. Immortals could absorb and refine immortal elemental energy to increase their cultivation. However, no matter how much true core energy this immortal refined, it would not be able to increase his cultivation level, not even by a tiny bit. Under the envious and hateful gazes of the crowd, the giant hammer disappeared from Murong Yu's hand and was put away into the Hichu Luo Shu. Although he couldn't use it, Yu Mengqing and the others could. Moreover, Murong Yu had Shengzhen and countless Shengzhen's disciples behind him. Not bad. You're getting stronger and stronger. However, you still have to die today. After Murong Yu put away the giant hammer, Li Di stepped down from the void and looked down at Murong Yu with disdain. Murong Yu took a few steps forward and stood in the void. He looked at Li Di with a smile and said indifferently, Li Di, you said this a long time ago in White Sun City, didn't you? Yes, you said in Skyfire City as well. Including this time, you said it more than 3 times, right? However, I'm still standing here talking and laughing while you're like a shadow. Wherever I go, you follow. You're a profound sage, but you can't do anything to me. If it were me, I would have already found a piece of tofu and committed suicide. Li Di's face instantly darkened, but the murderous aura in his eyes became even colder. Being sharp-tongued won't delay your death. Die. Li Di was enraged. He reached out with his hand and grabbed at Murong Yu. Murong Yu's pupils abruptly shrank. With a thought, Tianmeng's severed finger appeared in his hand. At the same time, the soul pool in his soul space started to boil. Streaks of terrifying soul power surged out from the soul pool and transformed into divine dragons. They tore through the void and attacked Li Di. At the same time, Murong Yu fully activated the power of Tianmeng's broken finger. Even if the power of Tianmeng's broken finger was limited, Li Di, who was like a haunting ghost, must be killed. Even if he had to waste a bit of power, he must kill him. Buzz. When the broken finger activated its power, it erupted with a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth. A white, fist-sized bead rose from Li Di's body and finally suspended above his head. White, wave-like power fell down and shrouded Li Di, firmly protecting him. A power that was not inferior to the broken finger erupted from the bead, enveloping the entire left origin city and sweeping in all directions. At this moment, the countless cultivators in the entire left origin city felt that they could not resist. It was as if they had become a lonely boat in a stormy sea that could be torn apart at any time. Although the broken finger is powerful, my tears of the sea is not bad either. Li Di's loud laughter came. Under his urging, the power of the tears of the sea above his head became more and more terrifying. Murong Yu narrowed his eyes slightly, and a cold, murderous intent and surprise flashed across the depths of his eyes. Although the tears of the sea was not as powerful as Tianmeng's broken finger, it was the most powerful divine weapon Murong Yu had ever seen. The incomparably dazzling radiance of energy was so dazzling that Murong Yu couldn't even open his eyes. The terrifying aura that it emitted made even Murong Yu's soul that had reached the 2-star level and condensed a soul pool tremble. It's at least a peerless grade or even a divine grade divine weapon. With a thought, Murong Yu's figure flickered, and he turned into a stream of light and shot out of left origin city. If they fought here, just the aftermath of the battle would raze the entire left origin city to the ground. At that time, countless sages would die because of Murong Yu. Li Di might not feel anything, but Murong Yu would not allow such a thing to happen. What was the difference between him and those homicidal maniacs? However, Murong Yu's retreat made Li Di think that he had escaped. Immediately, he chased after him. However, he laughed loudly. "Little bastard, you can't escape today. In order to kill you, I went back to the Sky Slaughter sect to borrow the tears of the sea. You're dead. It's been hard on you. Is this a peerless grade or a divine grade divine weapon? But after today, this divine weapon is mine." Hearing Li Di's words, Murong Yu was shocked. The Sky Slaughter sect was powerful, but it was definitely not as powerful as the 9 in Holy Kingdom. A divine grade divine weapon like the Tears of the Sea, even in the Sky Slaughter sect, was probably an extremely important divine grade divine weapon. Since this guy could borrow it, one could imagine his status in the Sky Slaughter sect. However, Since Moronyu dared to offend the Sky Fire City, why would he be afraid of the Sky Slaughter sect? Soul attack? Little bastard, do you know that the Tears of the Sea is not an ordinary divine grade divine weapon, but a divine grade divine weapon for soul defense? Your divine grade divine weapon is useless against me. Li Di laughed loudly, and his figure turned into a white light that swept across the endless void, quickly chasing after Moronyu. Moronyu was secretly shocked. No wonder his divine grade divine weapon was useless against Li Di. And Li Di wasn't on guard at all. It turned out that he had such a powerful treasure. Swoosh! Swoosh! The two of them, one in front and one behind, turned into two streams of light that swept across the endless void. In the blink of an eye, they appeared tens of billions of miles away from the left origin city. Behind them, the little lowly, the few experts from the Sky Fire City who hadn't left, and a portion of the sages from the left origin city also caught up. However, the sages from the left origin city were too weak, and their speed was too slow. They couldn't catch up at all. Instead, it was the little lowly's speed that surprised Moronyu. The little lowly wasn't flying at all. Instead, she was shuttling through the void. Every time she shuttled, she would move a large distance forward. The distance she covered was even greater than Morongyu's instant shift. What kind of body movement is this? Everyone who saw this scene was shocked. Even Li Di was secretly on guard. Swoosh! Finally, above the void that was hundreds of billions of miles away from the left origin city, Moronyu stopped. Little bastard, you finally stopped running? Li Di rushed up with a hideous smile and directly launched a storm of attacks. Why should I run? I haven't killed you yet. Wouldn't it be too easy for you if I ran away? Moronyu sneered. The soul pool in the soul space calmed down, and he withdrew his divine grade divine weapon. Since his divine grade divine weapon couldn't do anything to Li Di, he didn't want to waste it. He immersed his mind into the broken finger and began to activate the power of the broken finger. Rumble. Under Morongyu's control, the severed finger trembled violently. Following that, an incomparably berserk aura burst out and soared into the sky. It swept out in all directions and intimidated the myriad of worlds. Streaks of heavenly flames shot out from the severed finger, instantly engulfing the space Moronyu was in. Then, like a tide, the flame spread out in all directions. Wherever it passed, the void was directly annihilated. Even the space turbulence spurted out by the heavenly fire was directly burned. Rise! Moronyu roared and threw the severed finger into the air. Suddenly, the broken finger expanded with the wind, and in less than an instant, it had expanded into a huge mountain range that stretched across the sky. In that instant, even Moronyu felt a strong sense of powerlessness rising in his heart. It was a feeling of powerlessness that couldn't be resisted. Especially Li Di, who looked at the broken finger with a pale face, and there was fear in the depths of his eyes. Moronyu moved his mind, and the broken finger that was the size of a mountain shook in the void, and then pointed at Li Di. Chapter 1309. Boom! At this moment, all the hairs on Li Di's body stood on end. An extremely strong aura of death instantly shrouded his heart. An irresistible sense of powerlessness shrouded his entire body. His expression changed drastically, and his body involuntarily retreated. However, he soon stopped and looked at Broken Finger in the void with a red face, his face full of resentment. It seemed that he was a little embarrassed and angry because he retreated in fear, but also as if he suddenly remembered that he had the tears of the ocean and could fight against Broken Finger. With a thought, the power in Li Di's body surged into the tears of the ocean like a torrent. With the infusion of Li Di's power, the tears of the ocean first trembled violently. Then, with a boom, a towering wave burst out. White, wave-like power constantly erupted from the tears of the ocean and rushed into the sky. Then it spread out in the sky. Rumble, like a stormy sea. Soon, a vast ocean appeared above Li Di's head and drowned the world. Waves that soared up to the nine heavens surged out continuously, shattering even the void. The aura that erupted annihilated everything. The first to bear the brunt was everything near them. Whether it was the towering mountains or the bottomless ravines, they were directly shattered and crushed in a powder under the impact of the terrifying aura. The violent aura still swept out, and even the experts in Zhuiyuan City, hundreds of billions of miles away, felt like the world was going through a reincarnation. What's going on? The people who were chasing after Murong Yu and Jian Wushuang were careless and were sent flying by the aura of the tears of the ocean, even though they were close to the two of them. In fact, some of the weaker ones were even seriously injured. When they looked ahead, they couldn't help but widen their eyes. When did the ocean appear here? Is it an illusion? Many of them were sages near Zhuiyuan City. They were very familiar with this area. However, the boundless land in front of them had turned into a vast ocean. The sky and the earth were one. It was a world of ocean. The seawater surged, and the waves shook the heavens. What a terrifying power. Even a prime saint wouldn't be able to withstand a single wave. Wouldn't they be blown apart? In the distance, the expert from Skyfire City had grim expressions as they muttered to each other. This is the attack of Li Di's Saint artifact. This time, I'm afraid, Murong, you will find it hard to resist. Another expert from Skyfire City gloated. However, as he spoke, he stole a glance at the little lowly not far away. At this moment, the little lowly was standing in the sky with a giant axe in her hand. Her rosy little face was tense as she looked at the endless sea in front of her. It's best that Murong Yu is dead, although we didn't kill him. However, our mission can be considered completed, the third expert from Skyfire City said with a smile. His face was relaxed. Murong Yu might not die. Although the power of his severed finger was not as strong as that of the ocean, it was still very strong. But I have a feeling that Li Di can't kill him. As for the result, let's wait and see. The leader from Skyfire City said with an indifferent expression. Ha ha ha! Murong Yu, you little bastard. My Tear Ocean Pearl is a saint artifact. It can even kill a saint king easily. Now, let's see where you can escape to. After taking out the Tear Ocean Pearl, Li Di laughed loudly. He was extremely crazy and happy. It was as if Murong Yu was dead for sure. That's the Tear Ocean Pearl. Looking at the center of the endless sea, a white light the size of a fist was floating. However, it looked different from before when it was just a pearl. Now, this pearl was in the shape of a water droplet, just like a teardrop. It emitted an extremely terrifying aura. Legend has it that the Tear Ocean Pearl was refined from a sovereign's tear. Seeing Murong Yu looking at the Tear Ocean Pearl, Li Di seemed to be very kind and introduced it to him. He must have thought that Murong Yu was dead for sure, so he told him this. A sovereign's tear? Murong Yu's expression became serious. If this was really a sovereign's tear, its power would not be limited to this. Even a strand of hair on the body of a powerhouse of that level contained extremely terrifying power and could easily kill a saint below the sovereign level. It was as if the things on the body of a god could easily kill an immortal. Little bastard, give me the soul sanctification technique, and I'll leave you with an intact corpse. Otherwise, I'll destroy your physical body and imprison your soul, and your technique will still be mine. Li Di laughed sinisterly and looked at Murong Yu with disdain. Murong Yu suddenly laughed. He felt that Li Di was very funny. Wasn't it just a slightly more powerful saint artifact? He was so smug that he spouted a bunch of nonsense. Immediately, he sneered and said, Li Di, have you said enough? If you've said enough, let's fight. I'd like to see how you're going to kill me. I'm looking forward to it. Li Di was furious. If that's the case, then die. As he spoke, he moved his mind. Instantly, the tears of the vast sea burst out with an even more dazzling light. At the same time, the incomparably huge ocean began to churn violently. It tore through the void and swept towards Murong Yu, intending to tear him into millions of pieces. Murong Yu's hair stood on end. An extremely strong sense of danger shrouded his heart. If it was in the past, he would have fled long ago. How could he be a match for the tears of the vast sea? However, He had something to rely on now. The heavenly mist broken finger, which had stopped because of the tears of the vast sea, vibrated again. Streaks of terrifying heavenly fire kept shooting out. Then, under Murong Yu's control, the broken finger pressed toward Li Di with a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth. Child's play break. Li Di sneered disdainfully. He controlled the endless sea to form a wave that was like a giant dragon. It rushed toward the broken finger, intending to crush it. I wonder who will win. In the distance, countless people watched this terrifying battle with excitement on their faces. It should be Li Di. Murong Yu's broken finger is powerful, but compared to the aura of the endless ocean, it pales in comparison. Yes, I feel the same way. However, Murong Yu looks so confident. Does he still have some tricks up his sleeve? Murong Yu will lose without a doubt. That broken finger is like a lonely boat in a stormy sea. How can it withstand the attack of a wave? As long as the wave hits, the boat will be torn into millions of pieces. How is that possible? An undead realm expert sneered at Murong Yu while spouting nonsense. However, before he could finish his words, his expression changed dramatically as he looked ahead. He couldn't finish his words, because the broken finger was as huge as a mountain, but the water dragon was hundreds of times bigger than the broken finger. It rushed over with a terrifying pressure. The broken finger was like an ant, and the water dragon was like an indomitable giant. With such a great disparity, they still wanted to fight? Anyone would find it ridiculous. Under Murong Yu's indifferent expression and Li Di's disdainful and ferocious expression, the two sides finally began their first collision. Bang! An earth-shattering sound resounded, reverberating through the world. Li Di's ferocious expression suddenly froze, and he looked ahead with a look of horror and disbelief. At the moment of collision, the incomparably huge water dragon was quickly shattered. It was like a huge tofu the size of a mountain and a millstone-sized iron hammer had collided. Although the tofu was huge, it was not on the same level as the iron hammer. It couldn't withstand a single blow. Asterisk crash. Asterisk the huge water dragon directly exploded, and a considerable part of it was directly burned by the heavenly fire. Li Di finally reacted, and he roared again and again to control the endless sea, transforming it into a huge water dragon that quickly strangled the broken finger. For a time, the void was constantly shattered by the impact of these water dragons. An aura that was even more terrifying than the one before suppressed the crowd in the distance, forcing them to retreat again and again. However, it was all in vain. In front of the power of the broken finger, the water dragon was just a paper tiger. It was shattered with a gentle poke. How is this possible? This is impossible. Murong Yu, you're definitely going to die today. Li Di roared hysterically. He'd been dealt a terrible blow. Under his control, the entire boundless sea began to tremble violently. In the end, the endless sea transformed into a huge water dragon that traversed between heaven and earth, roaring and attacking Murong Yu. However, Li Di's face quickly turned pale, and the power in his body was greatly consumed. Controlling these water dragons was a little overconfident for him at his level. If he had not swallowed some pills that temporarily increased his power and replenished it before he took out the tear pearl of the ocean, his power would have been depleted long ago. The tear pearl of the ocean is only SOSO. Murong Yu still maintained an indifferent smile. He originally planned to kill Li Di directly. However, he now wanted to defeat Li Di physically and psychologically in one fell swoop. Sometimes it was quite satisfying to watch the enemy collapse and die. The psychology of defeating Li Di was actually very simple. He just had to destroy his greatest reliance. In other words, he had to destroy the water dragon that traversed between heaven and earth. Even if it was a waste of the broken finger's power, Murong Yu had to do it. Moreover, it was not as simple as killing Li Di. News of today's battle would spread very quickly. Even a saint-level sacred weapon that had been activated to its full power was destroyed, so who would dare to cause trouble for him? Unless their strength surpassed the holy ruler realm. The effect Murong Yu wanted was to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Otherwise, there would be scoundrels eyeing him everywhere in the future. How would he have so much time to deal with them? Therefore, his heart sank, and an incomparably violent power surged wildly into the broken finger through the void. Suddenly, under his control, the remaining power in the broken finger all went berserk. Chapter 13:10. Boom! After an earth-shattering explosion, the broken finger, which was originally as huge as a mountain, expanded once again in the sky. In just an instant, it had expanded to the size of the water dragon. Moreover, the broken finger had not only expanded in size, but its aura had also increased by 100 times. When it was only 1% of the water dragon's size, the broken finger's power was only about 1/10 of the water dragon's. After 100 times increase, it surpassed the water dragon in one fell swoop, reaching 10 times the size of the water dragon. In the sky, the heavenly fire was constantly emitted from the broken finger, filling the sky and earth. The void that was released from the heavenly fire was directly burned down. Even the spatial turbulence did not dare to appear out of fear. Tsk tisk. The sound was constantly heard. Wherever the heavenly fire passed, the water dragon was quickly annihilated. Streaks of steam rose into the sky and filled the sky above the 9 heavens. Li Di, even if you have a holy weapon, you're just a clown. Murong Yu's disdainful voice spread far and wide. Li Di's face was so gloomy that it was as if water was dripping out of it. His eyes shone with extreme hatred and coldness, as if he was about to devour someone. Kill. He did not retort to Murong Yu. This was because he did feel that the holy weapon was not only rapidly melting under the broken finger suppression, but it was also losing ground. Murong Yu was telling the truth. However, Li Di was extremely furious. Streaks of power were crazily channeled by him and transmitted to the tier of the ocean across the sky. The impact caused the tier of the ocean to erupt in violent waves that rushed towards Murong Yu. Li Di, your performance is over. I'll send you to reunite with Li Di Yu. Kill. Murong Yu sneered and suddenly roared. The broken finger above the 9 heavens seemed to be grabbed by an invisible hand and stabbed down fiercely in the void. Bang! 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 The huge water dragon could not withstand a single blow and was quickly annihilated. At this moment, the heavenly fire had already enveloped the entire sky and earth. It wrapped around the water dragon from the outside and quickly shrank inwards. Tsk, tsk, tsk. Sharp and ear-piercing noises spread out in all directions. Everyone in the distance saw that the water dragon was shrinking rapidly under the attack of the heavenly fire. In just a few seconds, the water dragon had shrunk to 1% of its original size. And this speed was getting faster and faster. Li Di roared furiously and poured all of his power into the oceanic tear pearl. However, the water dragon was getting smaller and smaller. Even the light of the tears of the ocean gradually dimmed. The tears of the Azure Sea was actually damaged after consuming too much energy. If this continued, he might not even be able to keep the tear pearl of the Azure Sea. This little bastard's strength is terrifying. Li Di looked at Murong Yu with bloodshot eyes. Suddenly, it soared into the air and entered the water dragon, becoming a part of it. In the next moment, the water dragon produced a startling roar. It tore through space and quickly fled into the distance. Li Di was unwilling to accept this. However, even a saint-grade sacred artifact was no match for Murong Yu. What else could he do? He could only escape. However, he still needed to see if Murong Yu would let him escape. Li Di, where do you think you're going? Murong Yu coldly shouted. The severed finger in the sky directly traversed through space and time and appeared above Li Di. Then it pressed down. Bang! The entire water dragon exploded into pieces. Li Di turned into a stream of light and was blasted out of the water dragon. He spat out blood in the void. Some people even saw that Li Di's body was about to crack. His aura had fallen to the peak of the undead realm. He was so severely injured that he couldn't even maintain his cultivation level. After the broken water dragon was destroyed, the broken finger broke through space again and strangled Li Di. Li Di's heart was enveloped by an extremely strong aura of death. He scanned the oceanic tear pearl with his divine telekinesis. However, he saw that there were tiny cracks on the surface of the oceanic tear pearl. His expression changed immediately. Then, he looked at the broken finger that was shooting toward him. Li Di's heart was filled with despair. With the power of the broken finger, he couldn't resist it even when he activated the holy grade holy weapon with all his strength. Now he couldn't. There was no way out. He would definitely die. Damn it. Even if I die, I'll drag you down with me. Li Di gritted his teeth and turned to look at the eyes that were shooting toward him. Looking at Li Di's extremely resentful eyes, Murong Yu's heart moved. He seemed to have grasped something. However, he couldn't think of anything at the moment. He just felt that something was wrong. Little bastard, didn't you want to kill me? Then let's die together. While speaking, Li Di's mind had already triggered the oceanic tear pearl. Suddenly, the oceanic tear pearl, which had already dimmed, shone brightly again. An extremely terrifying aura burst out crazily. Die together? He wants to explode the holy grade holy weapon. Murong Yu suddenly stopped. He finally knew what was wrong. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. After discovering Li Di's intention, Murong Yu turned around and teleported away. He was as fast as he could be. Everyone who was watching from afar was puzzled by what was happening. They didn't know why Murong Yu suddenly turned around and fled when he could have killed Li Di. Why was Li Di, who was originally like a stray dog, chasing after Murong Yu with a hideous smile? However, they soon got the answer. This was because a terrifying wave of energy that made even their souls tremble was madly sweeping over from Li Di's side. In an instant, some of the weaker people were suppressed and spat out blood. They were actually injured. Self-destruct. Everyone's expression changed, and the two words suddenly appeared in their minds. Then, they moved at the same time and shot toward the distance. All of them wished that they had more legs so that their speed could soar. When they came to their senses, Li Di had already finished accumulating his power. Boom. It was as if heaven and earth had exploded. An earth-shattering sound was heard. Bang, bang, bang. In fact, before the shockwave from the sacred weapon's explosion could sweep over, some of the spectators nearby had already exploded and died from the impact of the explosion. Other than the few experts from Skyfire City and Little Lolita, most of the people were injured. Even if they weren't injured, their blood and chi were churning like a raging river. Heaven and earth were torn apart, and a black hole appeared in the void. It was formed by the explosion of a sacred weapon. In the center of the black hole, there was an extremely terrifying power. As the power continued to dissipate, the black hole became bigger and bigger. As the black hole became bigger, the power in the black hole became more and more terrifying. An irresistible feeling that made people's hearts palpitate and their souls faint appeared in the hearts of all the living beings. All the living beings tried their best to escape into the distance. However, the speed of the black hole was extremely fast. In an instant, it expanded to hundreds of millions of miles. In another instant, it expanded to hundreds of millions of miles. Run quickly. The people who were watching the battle between Murong Yu and Murong Yu were about to be scared to death. Most of them regretted it, as they fled quickly. However, the distance between them and the black hole was getting faster and faster. Finally, some of the sages who were not fast enough were caught up by the black hole and were directly sucked into it. Then, there was no more then. They were directly annihilated by the black hole. More and more people were constantly being swallowed by the black hole. In just a few breaths, less than 10% of the original people were still running for their lives. The rest were all swallowed by the black hole. At this moment, little Lolita's face became solemn. Her figure was constantly shuttling through the void as a look of anxiety flashed in her eyes. At the same time, she kept looking behind her. She was looking at the rapidly approaching black hole and also looking for Murong Yu. However, in her heart, There was no longer any hope of luck. This black hole was so terrifying that Murong, you would bear the brunt of it. There was almost no chance of survival. This big bad guy, harming others and himself. If you don't die, I will definitely settle the score with you. Little Lolita gritted her teeth as her figure shuttled through the void quickly. Her speed was even faster than the few experts from Skyfire City. However, the distance between her and the black hole was getting closer and closer. If this continued, she would definitely be swallowed by the black hole. At this moment, Zui Yuancheng had already appeared in front of her. There was no teleportation array in Zui Yuancheng City. Otherwise, she could have left through the teleportation array. What should I do? What should I do? There are so many people in Zui Yuancheng City. Are they going to be swallowed by the black hole? Little Lolita was extremely anxious as she looked at the rapidly approaching Zui Yuancheng City. Apart from being anxious, she was not flustered. Moreover, she was anxious because of the sages in Zui Yuancheng City. It seemed like she still had a trump card to save her life. Could it be the great destruction of heaven and earth? At this moment, the entire Zui Yuancheng City was shrouded in an irresistible and terrifying aura. One by one, the sages rose into the sky. They only took a glance at the rapidly approaching black hole behind them. Then, they suppressed their trembling souls and fled into the distance. However, there were more people who were stunned by this scene. They did not even have the strength to escape. The black hole was still hundreds of millions of miles away from Zui Yuancheng City. However, Zui Yuancheng City seemed to be annihilated. Countless sages who were not powerful were suppressed to the point that they could not move. The larger the black hole behind them, the more terrifying its power would be. It's over, it's over. Looking at the rapidly approaching black hole, many sages in Zui Yuancheng City who could not escape in time closed their eyes in despair. However, at this moment, some people who did not close their eyes were surprised to see a monstrous giant hand tearing through the void and grabbing directly from the nine heavens. Before the giant hand could grab the black hole, the incomparably violent and terrifying black hole actually stopped moving forward. It was as if there was an incomparably solid, invisible barrier around the black hole that blocked it. It could not move forward and could only roar on the spot. The black hole was actually imprisoned. Everyone who saw this scene was dumbfounded. However, what shocked them was yet to come. After imprisoning the black hole, the giant hand stopped above the nine heavens and grabbed at the incomparably huge black hole from the air. Rumble, a series of loud, muffled sounds continued to spread. As the giant hand's 5 fingers continued to shrink, the raging black hole actually shrank rapidly. Chapter 13:11. The 5 fingers of the giant hand above the ninth heaven were shrinking rapidly, and the huge black hole that was emitting an extremely terrifying aura was becoming more and more violent. Everyone in the Left Origin City could even feel that the aura in the black hole was rapidly increasing. It must be because more and more power was gathering together, and the quantitative change caused a qualitative change. However, no matter how violent and powerful the power in the black hole was, it could not break free from the shackles of the giant hand. Under the effect of the giant hand, the black hole was shrinking rapidly. After a few breaths, the black hole had been suppressed to the size of 1,000 miles. However, the smaller it was, the more violent the aura it emitted was. At this moment, the giant hand above the sky grabbed the black hole fiercely. Suddenly, the black hole was swallowed by an extremely powerful suction force. During this process, the black hole became smaller and smaller. Finally, it became the size of an ordinary person. It was caught in the palm of the giant hand that had returned to the size of an ordinary person. Before the people in the Left Origin City could react, the giant hand once again tore through the void and disappeared above the ninth heaven. That terrifying black hole is gone just like that. After a long time, the people in the Left Origin City finally reacted. All of them looked at each other with lingering fear after surviving the disaster. They were shocked and felt extremely lucky. This black hole is too terrifying. If it wasn't for the sudden appearance of the giant hand, the entire left origin city would have been destroyed. I wonder who that expert is and what realm he has reached. It should be the almighty of our holy kingdom. They would never allow such a thing to happen in their country. If only I had such powerful strength, someone said enviously. However, before he could finish his sentence, he had already been despised by the people around him. There were probably not many experts of that level in the entire holy world. It was almost impossible for the left origin city to have such an expert. I don't know which bastard caused this black hole. If I find out, I'll definitely kill him. Suddenly, an expert said with a ferocious face. Someone immediately sneered, "Forget it. That black hole is so terrifying. The strength of the person who created it is definitely not weak." I wonder if Murong Yu and the others were annihilated by the black hole. The black hole came from their side. I don't know if they have been annihilated. What I know is that none of the people from the left origin city who went to watch the show came back. The entire army was wiped out. Among the people who had chased after Murong Yu, other than the little lowly and a few experts from Skyfire City, no one else returned. The little lowly was still fine. She was still able to maintain her calm. However, the experts from Skyfire City were all pale, and their eyes were filled with shock. If it wasn't for the giant hand suddenly taking back the black hole, they would have died without a doubt. However, what puzzled them was that Li Di's detonation of the sacred artifact had actually triggered such a terrifying black hole. A sacred-grade sacred artifact did not have such an ability. Is it an ancestral sage or a primal chaos ancestral sage? In the distance, Murong Yu appeared in the void and looked in the direction the hand had disappeared with a look of shock on his face. He was incomparably shocked. He had never thought that a saint-grade sacred artifact would be able to trigger such a disaster. He didn't expect that such an expert would appear. The strength of the person who had taken action must have surpassed the saint ruler realm. Murong Yu even had a feeling that the ancestral sage Huang Shi and the others he had met in the heavenly fire space might not be comparable to this person. However, Murong Yu did not know their specific realm. He was sure that the person was at least an ancestral sage. While pondering, Murong Yu looked at the heavenly Meng broken finger that he had taken back to the Hichu Luoshu world, where he realized that Li Di was going to detonate the sacred-grade sacred artifact. Murong Yu teleported away. In the end, he directly entered the Hichu Luoshu world and teleported away. Otherwise, no matter how fast he teleported, he would not be as fast as the black hole. Once swallowed, even if Murong Yu had the Hichu Luoshu world, he would probably be crushed into powder. At this moment, the heavenly Meng broken finger was floating quietly in front of Murong Yu. It was like a broken finger of a mortal, without any energy fluctuations. Even the heavenly fire was gone. The broken finger's power has been completely depleted. From now on, the broken finger will be useless apart from being able to sense the remaining parts of heavenly Meng's body. Murong Yu thought it was a pity and a little gloomy. The broken finger's power had been depleted, which meant that he had lost a powerful trump card. In the future, if he encountered an imperishable stage expert, he would have no trump card to use. However, Murong Yu quickly recovered his mood. No matter how strong the heavenly Meng broken finger was, it was still an external object. Having it made Murong Yu more dependent on it, and made him less eager to fight. The path of cultivation depends on oneself. Only when one is strong can one be truly strong. Murong Yu smiled and adjusted his mood. He was about to enter the Hichu Luoshu. However, he quickly stopped. He looked at the area where Li Di had detonated the sacred-grade sacred artifact with a puzzled expression. Is a sacred-grade sacred artifact that powerful? It actually created that black hole. Let alone a sacred-grade sacred artifact. Even a top-tier primal chaos ancestral artifact wouldn't cause that black hole. At most, it would only flatten everything within hundreds of millions of miles. However, the larger the area, the smaller the impact. In the end, it would disappear without a trace. However, this black hole is becoming more and more violent and more powerful. As soon as Murong Yu's doubts appeared, Hichu came out to explain. Murong Yu's eyes suddenly flashed. Is there a problem with this void? This is bad. As soon as that thought appeared in Murong Yu's mind, his expression suddenly changed. In the next moment, his figure flashed, and he entered the Hichu Luoshu world, then teleported away. Swish! Just as he was teleported away, a large hand swiftly grabbed him from the nine heavens. However, it only managed to grab a large part of the void. Your senses are so sharp? A somewhat surprised but slightly angry voice floated down from the nine heavens. Oomph! You actually destroyed it, causing me to be injured by the backlash. Otherwise, you would have died without a doubt. I'll remember this and let you live for 2 more days. After I repair it, I'll settle the score with you. Although the holy world is big, there will be no place for you. The voice gradually became softer and finally disappeared with the large hand. In the left origin city, Murong Yu stepped out of the Hichu Luoshu with a horrified expression. The person who attacked just now should be the expert who suppressed the black hole. His aura is the same. However, why did he attack me? Did I spoil some of his plans? Yes, that expert must be doing some research nearby. However, Li Di detonated the Saint-grade sacred artifact. The black hole caused by the Saint-grade sacred artifact must have something to do with him. Murong Yu thought for a while and frowned slightly. He had an impulse to go and investigate, but after thinking about it, he decided against it. With his current strength, he would be courting death if he went there. Immediately, he scanned with his divine thought and found little Lowly in the Heavenly Flame City. Then, he teleported and disappeared. Heavenly Slaughter Sect. A disciple of the Heavenly Slaughter Sect who was guarding the Soul Hall hurriedly ran into a hall and said loudly, "Great Elder, it's not good. Li Di's Soul Jade Slip is broken." What? Such a thing actually happened? Huang Tianqing was drinking tea. After hearing the disciple's report, he spat out a mouthful of tea and stood up with a shocked expression. Huang Tianqing, the Hall Master of the Soul Hall, was a super expert in the Heavenly Slaughter Sect. As for Li Di, he admired him. This was because Li Di's aptitude was extremely good and had reached the profound sage realm at a young age. He was one of the few disciples that the Heavenly Slaughter Sect had focused on cultivating. He was one of the successors of the next sect master. Li Di lent the Azure Sea Tear bead not long ago. Not good. Huang Tianqing's expression changed. Li Di was dead. So wouldn't the Azure Sea Tear bead fall into someone else's hands? Huang Tianqing's figure flashed and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in the main hall of the Heavenly Slaughter Sect. Soon after, experts with terrifying auras poured into the main hall one after another. The Heavenly Slaughter Sect's sect master and great elders were all very powerful. They were at least profound sage kings. Great Elder Huang, what's the matter? A great elder looked at Huang Tianqing with a gloomy expression. He was at a critical moment in his cultivation and was suddenly interrupted, so he was extremely unhappy. Li Di was killed. Huang Tianqing glanced at the great elders and said in a deep voice, "What?" Everyone was shocked. Even the Heavenly Slaughter Sect's sect master's face instantly became gloomy. Li Di borrowed the Azure Sea Tear bead not long ago. Now that he's dead, Huang Tianqing hadn't finished speaking when he was interrupted by a great elder. The Azure Sea Tear bead didn't fly back? The Azure Sea Tear bead wasn't Li Di's sacred tool. It was only lent to him temporarily. Under normal circumstances, if Li Di died, the Azure Sea Tear bead would automatically fly back. This was because the true owner of the Azure Sea Tear bead was a great elder of the Heavenly Slaughter Sect. The connection between the Azure Sea Tear bead and me has been cut off. Someone must have forcibly refined my spiritual consciousness that was imprinted on the Azure Sea Tear bead. At this moment, an old voice sounded in the main hall. He didn't mention the possibility of the Azure Sea Tear bead being detonated. This was because no one would detonate this sacred tool. Those who could detonate the Azure Sea Tear bead didn't need to do so. The Azure Sea Tear bead has been taken away. No matter who the other party is, no matter what price we have to pay, We must get it back. The Heavenly Slaughter sect master immediately shouted coldly. The Azure Sea Tear bead wasn't just a sacred tool. To the Heavenly Slaughter sect, it was a treasure that determined their fate. Soon after, countless experts of the Heavenly Slaughter sect flew out of the Heavenly Slaughter sect with murderous intent. Chapter 13:12. When Moronyu appeared beside the little lowly, she couldn't help but be shocked. While the little lowly was shocked, Moronyu was also a little surprised. The little lowly was actually fine. Not only that, she didn't even look like she had survived a disaster. It should be known that everyone in the left Origin City, including the experts from Skyfire City, had a lingering fear. From this, Moronyu was even more certain that the little lowly had a deep background. Big bad guy, I didn't expect you to still be alive. I thought you'd already been swallowed by the black hole. A surprised expression flashed across her face, and the little lowly looked at Moronyu with a smile and said. Morongyu's face darkened. Just as he was about to say something, the little lowly looked to the side. Morongyu's heart skipped a beat. He turned his head and saw the experts from Skyfire City walking over with an unfriendly expression. Morongyu's face revealed a smile. He turned and greeted them. The taste of the black hole isn't good, right? Do you want to try it again? The experts from Skyfire City suddenly stopped in their tracks. Their expressions froze, and their eyes were filled with fear as they looked at Moronyu. I have to admit that the power of the broken finger is very strong. It can easily kill us. The leader of the experts from Skyfire City looked at Moronyu and continued with a dignified expression. However, if I'm not wrong, the broken finger doesn't have much power left, right? Or even completely gone. Morongyu's heart skipped a beat, and his pupils suddenly shrank. However, the expression on his face turned cold. Since you don't believe me, I'll show you. Don't regret it. You should all be experts in the ancient sage realm, right? It must be very difficult to cultivate to this level, right? What a pity. The experts from Skyfire City had a slight change in expression. The others all looked at the leader of the group. However, they secretly transmitted their voices. This little bastard's broken finger shouldn't have any power left, right? Look at how fearless he is. Maybe he's just strong on the outside, but weak on the inside. Although the broken finger is terrifying, if it still has power, with our strength, we should be able to leave before he attacks. If it doesn't have power, seeing that Moronyu didn't take out the broken finger, the leader of the experts from Skyfire City gradually relaxed. In the end, a smile gradually appeared on his face. These bastards. Morongyu's heart was extremely helpless. It wasn't that he didn't want to take out the broken finger, but the broken finger's broken finger had no power. Once it was taken out, it would be exposed. At that time, they would make a move. Once several ancient sages sealed off the void, Moronyu wouldn't even have a chance to escape. However, he didn't use his broken finger. At the very least, they didn't dare to act rashly. And slowly, they surrounded T.S.'s. And slowly T.S. In fact, Moronyu could even sense that the surrounding space had been sealed by a restriction. However, these seals had no effect on Moronyu, unless they directly sealed the space and made Moronyu unable to move. Otherwise, no matter how many formations and seals there were, they wouldn't be able to do anything to Moronyu. Seeing this, the smile on Morongyu's face became even brighter. Everyone boom. However, before he could finish his words, there was an earth-shattering sound. A giant axe fell from the sky and slashed fiercely at one of the experts from Skyfire City. It happened so suddenly that Moronyu and the others didn't think that someone would launch a surprise attack, especially the expert who was ambushed. He was furious, although the giant axe's power was monstrous and terrifying. Compared to his strength, it was nothing. A dignified ancient was actually ambushed by a person. That person was instantly enraged. He flipped his hand and slammed it down fiercely, wanting to kill the person who ambushed him. No. Seeing that person make a move, he attacked fiercely. The leader of Sky Fire City's experts immediately turned pale with fright and roared. At the same time, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the person who attacked him. Because the person who ambushed him was the little lowly. The little lowly was only in the undying realm. How could she withstand the attack of an ancient's? She would probably be slapped to death. Even though the little lowly had a treasure to protect her, she wasn't slapped to death. However, if he continued to slap her, once the big shot behind the little lowly found out, they would definitely die. Thus, the leader of the group directly acted to stop them. At this moment, the person who attacked also realized that it was the little lowly who attacked. He was immediately shocked and hurriedly retracted his hand. However, the little lowly's attack didn't stop. She slashed the sky and slashed down fiercely, wanting to split the ancient's into two. The ancient's eyes flashed coldly, but he didn't dare to make a move. His figure flashed, and he was about to walk to the side to avoid the attack. Good chance. Seeing that the ancient's attention was all on the little lowly, Murong Yu's eyes suddenly burst out with bright holy light. At the same time, the soul pool in his soul space started to go crazy. He raised his soul power to the extreme and directly shot it out from between his eyebrows. With a loud boom, the invisible soul force pierced through the void and rushed into the soul space of the Prime Saint without any obstruction. It then quickly tried to strangle the Prime Saint's soul. The ancient's reaction was extremely fast. When the soul power rushed into the soul space, he had already reacted. Shocked, the ancient's terrifying soul power rushed into the soul space, trying to stop the soul from being killed. So fast, seeing that his soul power had just entered the ancient's soul space, the ancient's soul power rushed into the soul space crazily. Murong Yu couldn't help but be shocked. However, he didn't panic. He raised his soul power to the extreme and madly strangled the ancient's soul. Little bastard, you want to kill my soul? Go to hell. The ancient's eerie voice sounded in the soul space. At the same time, Murong Yu's endless soul power had been cut off. The soul power that was caught up to was quickly annihilated. It couldn't even withstand a single blow. Murong Yu sighed in his heart. His body swayed and collided with the ancient's. Boom! Although the ancient's reaction was extremely fast and his strength was extremely terrifying, almost instantly crushing Murong Yu's invading soul power. However, there was still a part of the soul power that bombarded his soul. The terrifying strength almost shattered his soul. At this moment, the ancient's soul power couldn't help but let out a shrill scream. His body, which was originally dodging the little lowly's attack, slowed down. Poof! The little lowly's giant axe chopped down and actually split the ancient's soul power into two. Murong Yu was even more shocked to find that the ancient soul was also split into two. It was as if Pang Jinni and the others were killed directly. There's definitely something strange about this giant axe. Even the ancient soul power was killed by it. Murong Yu was extremely shocked. At this moment, the other experts in Sky Fire City finally reacted. Old 5. Everyone let out a low roar as their eyes instantly turned red. Their eyes were filled with hatred and resentment. At the same time, a terrifying aura burst out from their bodies and rushed in all directions. The few of them were as close as brothers. From their low realms to their current realms, they had never left each other. Now they were all killed by someone. It was easy to imagine how angry and sad they were. Soul strangle. Just as they were increasing their strength, Murong Yu, who was colliding with the ancient soul power that was split by the little lowly's axe, roared. He mobilized all the power of the soul pool and divided it into several torrents that rushed towards the experts in Sky Fire City to strangle them. The angry experts were shocked. Only then did they remember that Murong Yu was a soul power saint. The moment Murong Yu shouted, their souls began to tremble. A sense of powerlessness appeared in their souls, making them unable to resist. They all knew the difference between their souls and Murong Yu's. If they were to be strangled by Murong Yu's soul power, they would probably be killed directly. Immediately, an ocean-like power surged into their soul space. However, Almost as if it was a conditioned reflex, they all retreated at the same time. They were afraid that their souls would be strangled by Muronyu. Eat my axe. After killing an ancient's soul power, the little Loli's face was flushed red and filled with excitement. She raised her giant axe and slashed at another ancient's soul power. Murongyu's face darkened. He teleported to her side and grabbed her arm. Then, he spread his angel's wings and turned into a stream of light that shot towards the distant horizon. Throughout this process, his soul pool was violently surging. Torrents of soul power were madly attacking the experts of Heavenly Fire City. The experts in Sky Fire City were shocked and retreated. Let me go. I'm going to kill them. This is my first time killing an ancient's soul power. The little Loli struggled to get away from Muronyu. However, Muronyu only grabbed her small hand. You're crazy. You killed one of them when they weren't paying attention. By the time they react, we'll be the ones dead. Muronyu roared. At the same time, he looked at the giant axe in the little Loli's hand. This axe was simply a weapon of mass destruction. It killed an ancient's soul power just like that. How terrifying. Although he's a soul power saint, his soul power can't break through our defense. Damn it, kill the two of them. When Muronyu and the little Loli had already rushed out of Left Origin City, the experts in Sky Fire City finally reacted. In anger, they also soared into the sky and chased after Muronyu and the little Loli. Kill their brother. They didn't care about the little Loli's background. Kill them first. Rumble, an incomparably powerful aura burst out from their bodies like stormy waves. In an instant, countless buildings around them were destroyed. The nearby sages didn't even have time to react before they were turned into dust by the terrifying power. They didn't even know why they suddenly died. Chapter 13:13. Hundreds of millions of streaks of terrifying energy blasted through the void, exuding a world-destroying aura as they shot towards Muronyu and the little girl. Although the power was not as strong as the previous black hole, it was enough to shock the Left Origin City's saints into despair. Some of them had already fled far away from the Left Origin City. After all, the Heavenly Flame City's experts were too strong. A single palm strike from an ancient saint could annihilate the entire Left Origin City. They didn't want to die. However, the Left Origin City's experts breathed a sigh of relief as they were already far away from the Left Origin City. Let me go. The little Loli was still struggling, wanting to kill the remaining Heavenly Flame City's ancient saints. However, Muronyu refused to let go of her. His angelic wings flapped fiercely, and his speed was comparable to an undead realm expert. Moreover, Muronyu's space Saint Godhead's power was pushed to the limit. Terrifying space energy constantly vibrated from his body, allowing him to gradually merge with the void. If someone used their divine sense to track Muronyu, they would be shocked to discover that Muronyu's aura and figure were rapidly disappearing. It wouldn't take long for Muronyu to disappear from their divine sense. This was because Muronyu had already become one with the space around him. Of course, he had only merged with the void and was unable to become one with it. Otherwise, in the vast holy world, as long as there was a void, he could reach it with a single thought. If the holy world was compared to a true saint, then the omnipresent void was equivalent to his divine sense. Wherever his divine sense covered, he could directly teleport. Boom. When Muronyu's body merged with the void, his speed actually increased tenfold, and he was like a streak of light sweeping across the void. Even an undead realm expert's divine sense couldn't keep up with his speed. Even so, the distance between him and the several ancient saints chasing after him was rapidly shrinking. After all, the opponents were ancient saints, and their speed was far faster than Muronyu's. Muronyu's speed couldn't compare. The power of the several ancient saints tore through the void and poured down like a violent storm, wanting to kill Muronyu and the little Loli. However, the distance between the two sides was still a little far. The ancient saint's power was limited to a certain distance, but Muronyu was advancing a long distance every second. Therefore, the attacks couldn't reach him for the time being. But as the distance between the two sides shortened, the attacks would sooner or later fall on them. What made Murong depressed was the fact that the auras of the Prime Sages were simply too violent, causing the surrounding space to become extremely unstable. Murong didn't even dare to enter the Hichu, Luoshu world. Otherwise, he would have charged into the turbulent space, the origin of the holy of the heavenly flame city, of heavenly God, heavens of heaven space power. The little lowly stopped struggling at this time. After feeling Murong use enormous space power, she couldn't help but exclaim. In the next moment, she smiled and said, "I know it too." As she spoke, a surge of space power, no weaker than Murong rippled out from her body. "What's going on?" Murong looked at the little lowly in surprise, and his heart was a little shocked. "You have the space, Saint Godhead? You comprehended the space law?" Murong couldn't help but ask in surprise. The little lowly proudly raised her little head and said with a smug face, "Not only that, I also have the Space Saint physique." Space Saint physique? Murong frowned slightly, and his heart became more and more surprised. There were countless different types of physiques in the world. The chaotic celestial body was undoubtedly the strongest physique, and it was the supreme physique. Although the Space Saint physique couldn't be compared to the chaotic celestial body, it was the darling of space. According to legend, a Space Saint physique that was cultivated to the large success stage could perfectly integrate into the void and become one with the void. For such an existence, space was no longer an obstacle. They could directly shuttle through the void like a fish in water. Rumble. While Murong was still in shock, an incomparably terrifying force shot over from the distance and poured down like a torrent, strangling Murong and the little lowly. In an instant, Murong's heart was enveloped by an extremely strong aura of danger. An irresistible feeling of powerlessness drowned his heart. Murong was shocked, and with a thought, the Inyang Universe Cauldron and Hichu Luoshu were summoned to protect his body. However, even so, the dangerous aura in Murong's heart didn't decrease, and instead, it increased. The gap between a great sage and an ancient sage was just too big. However, Murong didn't intend to give up. Don't forget that he still had the trump card given to him by Tianming. If it really didn't work, he could only waste those trump cards. This was also why he dared to directly confront the ancient sages of Skyfire City. "You big baddies. You should go home and thank your lucky stars that I didn't kill you. How dare you chase after me? You're courting death." The little lowly's face was filled with anger, and she suddenly summoned the giant axe in her hand. Instantly, the giant axe expanded with the wind, and in an instant, it grew to the size of a pillar supporting the heavens. An incomparably terrifying aura was constantly emitted, and it intimidated the myriad worlds. "Heaven and Earth Splitter!" The little lowly cried out, and once again used the move that she had used against Murong. However, the power of the giant axe this time was many times stronger than before. The giant axe suddenly paused in the sky, and then came crashing down. With a hiss, the sky seemed to have been split into 200 pieces, and an incomparably terrifying aura enveloped heaven and earth. It locked onto the ancient sages of Skyfire City and came crashing down. The ancient sages of Skyfire City couldn't help but freeze at this moment. The little lowly hugged Murong's arm, and an incomparably vast spatial energy rushed over, colliding with Murong's spatial energy. Then they fused into one. Whoosh! With a flap of his angelic wings, Murong had already appeared hundreds of billions of miles away. His speed was far faster than Murong's fastest speed. A trace of surprise appeared on Murong's face. Just a moment ago, he seemed to have felt that the resistance of space had decreased by thousands of times. Even if space was a formless existence, there were many substances in space. These substances would create resistance to any moving object. The larger the object, the faster the speed, and the greater the resistance. Of course, The more powerful ones would be able to break through the air resistance when they were flying. Therefore, their speed was even faster. However, they could only smash through a portion of the resistance. But just now, Muronyu seemed to have no resistance at all. Of course, this was relative to his previous speed. There was definitely resistance, but the resistance had become extremely small, which was why his speed had soared. Swish, swish, swish. The angelic wings flapped wildly, and the two of them disappeared from the sight of the ancient sages of Skyfire City. In the end, they left the detection of their divine will. When Muronyu and Yishiwen disappeared from their line of sight, the huge axe that was chopping down with incomparably terrifying might rapidly shrank. Then, with a swoosh sound, it cut through the void and disappeared. It was all bark and no bite. It had a form but no power. Escaped. Several experts from Skyfire City gathered together, each of their faces revealing an incomparably shocked expression. The speed of those two is already comparable to an ancestor sage, right? Even so, we still have to give chase. Fifth brother's death must be avenged. Another person said with a ferocious expression. How? Can we catch up to them? The leader's face was filled with anger, but his heart was filled with helplessness. That was just a great sage. It was simply heaven-defying. His speed was comparable to an ancestor sage's. He had already surpassed the Saint King realm, let alone ancient sages like them. They could only eat the dust behind Muronyu and Yishiwen. However, they still continued to chase. But where was Murongyu's trace? At the same time, the expert from Sky Fiend Sect had already chased to left Origin City. However, they were soon enraged. Li Di actually detonated a Saint-grade Saint artifact, but he couldn't even kill the other party. That was just a great sage. An elder from Sky Fiend Sect said angrily and painfully. Li Di's death was a huge loss, and the destruction of his Saint-grade Saint artifact Azure C-Tier Pearl was even more painful. Because it involved the personal interests of Sky Fiend Sect, it was not an exaggeration to say that it would determine the life and death of Sky Fiend Sect. Muronyu. This person actually escaped. Even the experts from Skyfire City couldn't do anything to him, and he even killed an ancient sage? It wasn't difficult for the experts from Sky Fiend Sect to obtain this information. They only needed to capture a few people and read their memories. Although no one in Left Origin City saw Li detonate the Saint artifact, they only needed to go to the place where the Saint artifact was detonated and use the ability Trace to the source to easily restore the scene. You've gone too far. You killed my Sky Fiend Sect's disciple and destroyed our Saint-grade Saint artifact. You deserve to die. Many experts from Sky Fiend Sect had an extremely strong killing intent towards Muronyu. As a result, an order to kill Muronyu was quickly sent out from the Heavenly Fiend Sect. First, it was Skyfire City's kill order, and now it was Sky Fiend Sect's kill order. In an instant, Murongyu's name spread in Nano County and even the Nining province. Moreover, Sky Fiend Sect's kill order was extremely tempting. Anyone who could kill Murong, you could become a core disciple of Sky Fiend Sect, and even become an elder of Sky Fiend Sect and enjoy various resources of Sky Fiend Sect. Sky Fiend Sect was far from being as powerful as Nining Saint Nation. However, Sky Fiend Sect also had many super experts in the Saint King realm. Saint King realm was already ranked among the top experts in the Holy World. There might not even be one Saint King realm expert among 100 million ancient sages. If one could become a core disciple or an elder of Sky Fiend Sect and enjoy the resources, it was very likely that they would receive pointers from these people. Their strength would skyrocket, and it was not impossible for them to reach the Saint King realm. Therefore, after Sky Fiend Sect's kill order was issued, countless saints from Tranquil Sun Manor, Nano County, and even Nining Province took action. Each of them wanted to capture or kill Muronyu. Chapter 13-14. What are you looking at? Seeing Muronyu staring at her giant axe, the little lowly couldn't help but glare at him. Before the Heavenly Fiend Sect issued the kill order, Muronyu and the others had already left the Left Origin City. although they couldn't directly teleport away because there was no teleportation point. But with the cooperation of Murong Yu and the little lowly, they didn't know how far away they were from the left origin city. After no one was following them, Murong Yu and the little lowly naturally didn't rush. Even Yu Mengqing and the others came out of Hichu Luo Shu. However, when he thought about how the little lowly killed an ancient sage with a single axe, Murong Yu couldn't help but be shocked. His eyes glanced at the giant axe on the little lowly's shoulder from time to time. Therefore, the scene just now happened. Ruoyun, your giant axe really killed an ancient sage? Kurlon walked to the little lowly's side and looked at the giant axe with a shocked expression. Yu Mengqing and the others also looked over with shocked eyes. Although they didn't know how terrifying an ancient sage's strength was, it was 4 realms higher than them. It must be incomparably powerful. It's just an ancient sage. If it wasn't for the big scoundrel stopping me, the others would have been killed by me. The little lowly raised her arrogant little head, glanced at Murong Yu, and then said proudly. Murong Yu's face turned black. He couldn't be bothered to bicker with the little lowly. You're actually so powerful. Gongsun Yu walked up and asked curiously. The little lowly suddenly became bashful. Looking at everyone, she was a little hesitant. Everyone looked at her strangely. Just when they were about to ask, the little lowly spoke again. Not really. I'm just an undead realm expert. It's the giant axe's power that can kill an ancient sage. This giant axe ignores strength and defense and is incomparably sharp. No matter what it is, it can be split into 2 halves. Ignores strength and defense? Everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Murong Yu and the others couldn't help but be shocked. The giant axe's power was really too terrifying. What did it mean to ignore defense? In other words, it didn't matter if you were an ancient saint, a saint king, or an ancestral saint. No matter how powerful you were, you could block or even disperse the attacks of others. However, it was unable to stop the giant axe's attack. The axe cleaved down and struck the target that was protected by layers of defense. Furthermore, the axe was extremely sharp. If one's physical body was not too strong, they would definitely be cut in half. The ancient saint from Skyfire City was powerful enough. However, his physical body was probably just an ordinary saint body. Since his defensive power was useless, he would naturally be chopped to death by the giant axe. Furthermore, the axe could destroy souls. Little Lowly's strength was still not high. If she reached the level of the Ancestor Sage or the Primal Chaos Ancestor Sage, she would be able to defeat the Primal Chaos Ancestor. Apart from autarchs and sovereigns, they were probably invincible. Despite their shock, the group continued to advance toward the Desert of Death. After several twists and turns, Murong Yu and the others were still unable to reach the Desert of Death. This made Murong Yu sigh in his heart. However, although there were all kinds of troubles along the way, his strength was steadily increasing. If it weren't for those experts from Skyfire City, I'm afraid I would have already ransacked the Pang family's treasury and used their sacred artifacts to cultivate. I'm afraid I would have reached the 5th or even 6th level of the Great Saint Realm by now. Murong Yu thought to himself, a cold light flashing in his eyes. One day, he would return to Skyfire City. When that time came, he would raze the city lord's mansion to the ground. He wasn't that easy to hunt down. Anyone who tried to hunt him down would pay a heavy price. Fragmentary Star City is up ahead, when he suddenly said. Everyone looked over and saw a huge city in front of them. It looked like a prehistoric beast entrenched on the ground, emitting a powerful and ferocious aura. This city was even bigger than Skyfire City. Fragmentary Star City is the city of the Fragmentary Star sect. However, anyone can enter by paying an entrance fee. The vast mountain range next to Fragmentary Star City is the Fragmentary Star Mountain Range. The Fragmentary Star sect is entrenched in the depths. When he was the only one who had been to Fragmentary Star City before, so he explained, how strong is this Fragmentary Star sect? Murong Yu's heart skipped a beat. Fragmentary Star City is the overlord of the nearby area. Legend has it that their sect has an ancient saint ancestor overseeing it. However, the information I know is from a long time ago. I don't know if anyone has broken through to the great Saint King realm by now. The little lowly's face was full of disdain. Isn't it just an ancient saint? You can kill him with a swing of your axe. Hearing this, Yu Mengqing and the others couldn't help but laugh. Murong glared at the little lowly. This little lowly was too violent. She kept yelling about killing people all day long. It really made people speechless. Moreover, after she killed an ancient saint, she kept talking about this great achievement every day, as if the ancient saint really couldn't withstand a single blow. However, if the other party was prepared, the little lowly would be killed before she even had a chance to attack. Little lowly don't cause trouble. After glaring at the little lowly, Murong Yu and the others entered the city. However, with several great beauties, a young beauty, and a pink little lowly, Murong Yu and the others attracted a lot of attention as soon as they entered the city. Murong Yu, on the other hand, felt many murderous gazes. This was because the goddess-like girls surrounded him, and they seemed to have a close relationship with him, which made those people envious and jealous. As for Winnie, no one looked at the old man. In this regard, Murong Yu's face was full of smiles. Sometimes, being envied by others was also a kind of ability. Let's find a restaurant first and have a good meal. Murong Yu's divine sense spread out and soon found the busiest restaurant, Fragmentary Star Tower. Fragmentary Star Tower, 3rd floor. These people are too annoying. How can I eat when they look at me like that? Gongsun Ningyu said with some displeasure. Murong Yu ordered a table full of dishes. These were all delicacies of the holy world. Eating them could even increase one's cultivation, but of course, it was only a little. Yu Mengqing and the others, who had never eaten the food of the holy world, immediately ate heartily. However, Gongsun Ningyu soon felt uncomfortable. This was because since they came up, the people on the 3rd floor kept glancing at them. Yu Mengqing and the others had long been used to this, and they ate with a calm expression. However, Gongsun Ningyu was a little uneasy. She felt like she was a monkey being watched by others. Let's just kill them all. The little lowly glanced at those people, grabbed the giant axe, and was about to attack. Fortunately, Murong Yu was quick enough to press her down on the chair. Don't cause trouble. Murong Yu glared at her, then looked at Gongsun Ningyu and said, Ningyu, you just need to get used to it. In the future, these gazes will only increase, not decrease. Sister Ningyu, you're also a great beauty. In the future, you'll be even more beautiful. Unless you go out and wear a big black robe, these gazes are inevitable. Mu Liyue said to Gongsun Ningyu with a smile. Gongsun Ningyu blushed, lowered her head, and ate silently. You people really don't know how to be romantic. You actually offended a beauty. At this moment, the sound of footsteps came from the stairs, followed by a magnetic voice. Trouble is here. Murong Yu's heart sank, and he turned to look. Instead, he saw a white-clothed young man of about 25 or 26 years of age, holding a folding fan in his hand, slowly walking towards him. The youth's appearance was delicate, and his skin was tender. From afar, he looked like a woman. If he disguised himself as a woman, his beauty wouldn't be inferior to Yu Mengqing and the others. However, this person was definitely a man, and Murong Yu recognized his identity at a glance. Behind the white-clothed youth, there were 2 other youths. One was extremely handsome, and the other had a rough appearance. However, these 2 people seemed to be the youth's followers. They followed behind him without saying a word, and they didn't even lift their eyes. After seeing this white-clothed young man, the surrounding people withdrew their gazes with a schwa sound. It's over, it's over. These beauties are going to be ruined again. Some people showed a regretful expression and shook their heads. Of course, these were all thoughts in their hearts, and they didn't say it out loud. This person's identity isn't simple. Murong Yu saw the reactions of the surrounding people, and he immediately had this thought in his mind. Brother, beauties, this young man greets you. This young man has been rude. The white-clothed youth waved his folding fan like a weak scholar. After walking to a certain distance from Murong Yu and the others, he stopped and slightly cupped his fist towards Murong Yu and the others. His words were sincere, and his eyes were straight ahead. Muron, you saw the white-clothed youth's gaze flash past his face, and he didn't look at you Mengqing and the others. With Mengqing and the others' beauty, he didn't even look at them. Muron, you felt a trace of disbelief. There were only two people who would do this. Either he was a woman, or he was a eunuch. Even the most upright gentleman couldn't help but look at you Mengqing and the others. However, since this youth was so generous, Muron, you could only stand up and return the greeting. Brother, you and I hit it off at first sight. Why don't you come and have a few drinks? The white-clothed youth smiled and invited Muronyu. Muronyu was stunned for a moment, but soon after, he let out a faint smile and walked over. I am Bai Yixian, the sect master of the Broken Star sect. May I know your name? Muronyu smiled and gave his name. At the same time, his divine consciousness spread out. Soon, he heard the discussions of the people in the restaurant. Bai Yixian, the son of the Broken Star City's city lord, was a core disciple of the Broken Star sect. He was a romantic and elegant man with countless women. However, each of his women was willing to follow him, and he never forced them. Soon, Muronyu received some information about Bai Yixian. Oh, so you are Muronyu? My apologies. Bai Yixian was startled, and a trace of surprise flashed across his face. Chapter 13-15. Over the course of a meal, Muronyu and Bai Yixian had become much more familiar with each other. Moreover, according to the others' understanding, although Bai Yixian was also very fond of women, he had never used any coercive means. Although they didn't know whether it was true or not, at least Muronyu didn't dislike him that much. Therefore, before long, they had become like old friends who had known each other for countless years. However, during the conversation, Muronyu felt that the atmosphere was a bit strange. Logically speaking, it was impossible for a person like Bai Yixian to not look at Yu Mengqing and the others. Especially Yu Mengqing and the others. They were all outstanding beauties. However, Bai Yixian didn't look at them again, except for a glance when they first came to the restaurant. Instead, he kept looking at Muronyu with a strange look in his eyes. After talking for a while, Muronyu also knew why Bai Yixian had such a strange look after hearing his name. Because of the Tiansha sect and Tianhua City's pursuit order. However, Bai Yixian was only surprised for a moment and then returned to normal. He was a core disciple of the Broken Star sect, so he naturally had no interest in the reward of the Tiansha sect. Moreover, he guaranteed that Muronyu wouldn't have any safety problems in the Broken Star City. Even the Tiansha sect didn't dare to be presumptuous in the Broken Star City. After drinking and eating to his heart's content, Muronyu was about to leave. However, he was warmly invited by Bai Yixian. In the end, he couldn't refuse and agreed to stay in Bai Yixian's immortal mansion for a few days. Seeing Muronyu agree, Bai Yixian seemed very happy. He hurriedly paid the bill and left the restaurant. Then, he led Muronyu and the others to his mansion in Shattered Star City. On the way, Muronyu and the others met with Bai Yixian some distance away. Big pervert, did you find that Bai Yixian is a bit strange? Some indescribable strangeness? Kurlan's voice sounded in the ears of Muronyu and the others. She didn't speak directly, but transmitted her voice. I also feel the same. That Bai Yixian is a gentleman, but he is really too much of a gentleman. He didn't even spare us a second glance. There must be something fishy going on, Mu Liu said. Situ Xian smiled and said, maybe he's interested in our husband. The girls looked at each other and couldn't help but burst into laughter. However, their smiles were so stunning that the eyes of countless men on the road almost fell out of their sockets. Although the big scoundrel isn't handsome, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Who knows? Maybe she's really taken a fancy to him. The little lowly kept sizing up Muronyu as a crafty smile appeared on her face. Muronyu looked at the girls with a dark expression and said, what do you think? I did feel that there was something wrong with this Bai Yixian. Don't tell me he's prepared to deal with us? Everyone nodded, but no one knew what Bai Yixian was thinking. The little lowly waved the giant axe in her hand and said carelessly, I don't care what kind of scheme he has. If he dares to attack us, I will raze this Broken Star City to the ground. Moronyu glared at her, and then quickly caught up. However, his thoughts were similar to the little lowlies. In front of absolute strength, no matter what kind of scheme he had, he would directly smash it with a punch. Bai Yixian's mansion was not in the city lord's mansion, but in the east of the city. It was extremely luxurious, comparable to the city lord's mansion. After entering the hall, Moronyu and the others couldn't help but be surprised. There were portraits hanging on both sides of the hall. These portraits were not sacred tools, nor were they decorations hanging in ordinary houses. These portraits were all portraits of people. Looking around, there were only more than 100 portraits in the hall. Each and every one of them was a stunning beauty. However, Moronyu and the others soon found out. These portraits of beautiful women only occupied 1/10 of all the portraits in the hall, or even less than 1/10. As for the rest, they were all portraits of men. Every one of them was a handsome man. Seeing this scene, the faces of Moronyu and the others darkened, and a strange feeling welled up in their hearts. How could there be so many portraits hanging in the hall of their house? Moreover, Bai Yixian was a man. If it was just portraits of beautiful women, then it would be fine, but there were so many portraits of men hanging. Are these portraits painted by real people? You've seen all of them? Lan Kier asked straightforwardly. Bai Yixian just smiled faintly and didn't answer Kurlan's question, but turned to Moronyu and said with a smile, "Brother Morong, what do you think of my portraits? All of them are handsome men and beautiful women, and I have personally painted them. Usually, when I have nothing to do, I would like to admire these portraits. Looking at these portraits can make my heart calm down." Seeing the shocked faces of Moronyu and the others, Bai Yixian was very proud of his introduction. However, Morongyu's heart was cold. A man staring at the portraits of men? What kind of abnormal hobby is this? Could it be that this guy really likes men? Moronyu thought in his heart, but the more he thought, the more he felt cold. "Everyone, please wait here for a moment and admire these handsome men and beautiful women. I will go down to prepare a place for you to live, and will take my leave for the time being." Bai Yixian lit a sandalwood like incense, and then left. At the same time, when he left the hall, Bai Yixian's eyes flashed with an inexplicable light, and then he quickly left. Suddenly, the entire hall was submerged by the faint, strange fragrance. It shouldn't be something like a sleeping incense, right? Moronyu was a little vigilant at first, but later found that this fragrance was just an ordinary joke, and then he relaxed. Moronyu didn't have any interest in the portraits of beautiful women. As for the portraits of handsome men, he didn't even look at them. On the contrary, Yu Mengqing and the other women were enjoying the portraits of handsome men with great interest. Soon after Bai Yixian left, a servant came in with tea. But Bai Yixian didn't come over. After a long time, Moronyu felt a little thirsty and unconsciously drank a mouthful of tea. He didn't know why, but Yu Mengqing and the others were the same. "Hey, what's going on? My strength seems to have disappeared." Suddenly, Situ Xian exclaimed in surprise. Everyone's expression changed, and then Yu Mengqing also exclaimed, "My strength seems to have disappeared, and now I'm like a mortal." Before Yu Mengqing's voice fell, Mu Liue, Kurlan, Wen Yi, and the others, except for Moronyu, all of their expressions changed. Their strength had disappeared. Bang! The little lowly, who had been carrying the giant axe, couldn't hold it anymore after losing her strength. She fell to the ground directly, and a big hole was smashed in the hall's floor. Morongyu's heart stirred, and, just as he was about to speak, his expression changed slightly. His strength had disappeared. It must be Bai Yixian's doing. Everyone was panicking, and so were angry. Moronyu didn't panic, and his consciousness sank into his body, and found that his strength was still in his meridians and Saint Godhead. But it seemed to be imprisoned by something, and he couldn't circulate it. Moronyu tried to connect with his strength, but he still couldn't circulate it. Bai Yixian, Moronyu's face was black, and he gritted his teeth. When he entered the hall, he had already checked carefully. Whether it was the spices or the tea, there was absolutely no problem. He didn't even know how he had fallen for it. But one thing was for sure, it was Bai Yixian's doing. His boat had capsized in the gutter. Moronyu felt helpless, but more than that, he was angry. But the angrier he was, the calmer he became. His consciousness began to communicate with life force. At this time, a figure appeared at the entrance of the hall and slowly walked in. "Everyone, is the tea good?" Baishian swept a glance at everyone with a smile, and then her gaze landed on Murong-yu. Her eyes were full of wanton desire. Wait, Baishian's eyes actually had a trace of lust. At this time, Baishian was different from the elegant Baishian they had met in the restaurant. Although she had a smile on her face at this time, there was no elegance, only lust, and she was targeting Murong-yu. The moment they saw her, everyone suddenly realized, and the eyes of Yu Mengqing and the others were all cast on Murong-yu's face. It seems that Baishian is really a homosexual. It's over, my husband's chrysanthemum can't be protected. At this moment, Murong-yu's wives didn't have any anger in their minds, nor any countermeasures, but this somewhat absurd thought at the same time. But soon, they were stunned by their own thoughts. The next moment, they all looked at Murong-yu with sympathetic eyes, and the scene of Murong-yu being raped appeared in their minds. Feeling the eyes of the women, Murong-yu's face darkened. Was he marrying unvirtuous wives? This group of little girls, after I get out of here, I must teach them a lesson. Murong-yu thought in his heart, but looked at Baishian, who was slowly walking over. Ha! It seems that everyone knows my purpose. I'm sure everyone is curious about the portrait hanging in the hall. What's going on? Now, I'm not afraid to tell you that the men in these portraits are the most outstanding people I have slept with. Every time I have slept with them, their portraits will appear here. And soon, Murong-yu's portrait will also be hung in my hall. Isn't it very shocking? As if knowing that Murong-yu and the others didn't have any power to resist, Baishian said without any fear. Hearing this, the faces of the women changed slightly, and they felt a little disgusted. Because before this, they were still commenting on the portraits of handsome men. But now that they found out that these people have been slept with by Baishian, they suddenly felt a chill. Can you let them go? Murong-yu stood up and looked at Baishian with a somewhat sinister expression. As if he knew his fate, he didn't ask to be let go. Baishian shook her head and smiled faintly. Although I have no interest in them, they know my secret. But they all know my secret. Do you think I can let them go? Chapter 13:16. Hearing this, all the women's faces changed, and then they leaned towards Murong-yu at the same time. In their hearts, Murong-yu was their support, regardless of whether Murong-yu had the strength or not. Gongsun Ningyu first looked at Murong-yu with a surprised look, as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't say anything. Just as the women approached, Murong-yu's face became gloomy, and he looked at Baishian with murderous intent in his eyes. He said in a deep voice, "Baishian, leave a way out for everything, and we'll meet again in the future." Baishian sneered and walked slowly towards Murong-yu while waving her folding fan. "If you serve me well, I naturally won't kill them." In other words, how long they can live depends on your performance. If you satisfy me, I can also consider not killing you. Otherwise, once I get tired of playing with you, it will be your death. Murong-yu's face showed anger, and the women also glared at Baishian. But no one spoke. They all knew that no matter what they said, it was useless. Therefore, they didn't bother to waste their saliva with Baishian. It was just that they were extremely anxious in their hearts. But because they couldn't use it, they didn't even have the ability to transmit their voices. Murong-yu exhaled. Although he was still angry at Manchester United, he seemed to have been discouraged. It seemed that he had already been appointed. So he slumped in the chair and looked at Baishian. "I'm curious. There should be a lot of men who have been played by you, right? Where are those people now? Why are there no rumors about your manly style outside?" When asking this question, Yu Mengqing and others also looked at Baishian. Over the years, I have played with tens of thousands of men. Baishian was not in a hurry at all. She dragged a chair and sat in front of Murong-yu. She looked at Murong-yu calmly, as if admiring a work of art. The portraits hanging in the hall are the most outstanding people among those people, and they're also my favorite people. Murong-yu, you still don't know. I like you from the first time I saw you. At that time, I was determined to get my hands on you. Morong Yu and the others couldn't help but shudder. Goosebumps appeared all over their bodies. Bai Yixian was truly disgusted. In the end, Morong Yu couldn't help but interrupt him. Otherwise, if he continued, they would all be disgusted to death. Answer my question. Morong Yu coldly shouted. Bai Yixian didn't get angry. She just looked at Morong Yu lustfully and continued. I killed all of them. Otherwise, the news would have already spread out in fragmentary Star City. As for the rumors that I like women, that's just a cover-up. A cold light flashed in Morong Yu's eyes. Bai Yixian's strength wasn't very strong. She was just a high-level undead realm expert. However, she had actually played with tens of thousands of men. Those people were not only toyed with by him, but they were also killed by him in the end. It wasn't hard to imagine that most of them were from the Fragmentary Star sect. Some of them were people who had entered Broken Star City. He must have used his identity to get them. Otherwise, with his strength, it was impossible. Well, I've told you too much. I can't wait. Bai Yixian stood up and slowly walked over to Morong Yu. At the same time, she stretched out a big hand to grab Morong Yu. Wait, if you dare to do it, I'll shout. By then, the whole Fragmentary Star City will know about you. Morong Yu shouted. Bai Yixian laughed. Don't be too naive. My mansion is covered by countless arrays. Even if you shout until your throat is broken, no one will know. Otherwise, why don't you think I'm living in the City Lord's mansion? Hearing this, Morong Yu's face suddenly showed a smile. The anger, shock, humiliation, panic, and other negative emotions from before all disappeared. He sat on a chair, crossed his legs, and looked at Bai Yixian with a smile. Bai Yixian, do you really think you have everything under control? A touch of vigilance flashed on Bai Yixian's face, but she soon smiled. You are very strong, but you only rely on external forces. The drunken 100,000 tea and the white flame shadow incense can easily take down profound sages. How can you resist them? Thinking of that profound sage, I'm getting more and more excited. Morong Yu, let me have a good time. Bai Yixian laughed and quickly grabbed at Morong Yu. Morong Yu still had a smile on his face. Bai Yixian, did you forget something? Since you know that I am Morong Yu, you should know that I am a... Bai Yixian's face suddenly changed. With a thought, his figure was about to explosively retreat, but it was already too late. A soul saint. Morong Yu finally managed to say those words. The liquid soul power, which had been rolling in his spiritual space like raging waves, tore through the void and whizzed towards Bai Yixian in an attempt to kill him. The effects of the drunken 100,000 tea and the white flame shadow incense might be extremely terrifying, and even profound sages could easily be affected. However, they could only target strength and had no effect on the soul. It was precisely because of this that Gongsun Ningyu seemed to have something to say to Morong Yu, because she could use her soul force. It was also because of this that Morong Yu was not really shocked or panicked, because there was no need for that. Although Bai Yixian was strong, how could she escape from a soul attack? Moreover, Morong Yu inadvertently revealed that their mansion was sealed by layers of formations. Even if they fought here, no one outside would know. Therefore, he finally made his move. A high-level undead realm powerhouse, even at their peak, would not be able to resist Morong Yu's 2-star soul attack. What's more, Bai Yixian was not prepared and was very close to Morong Yu. Almost as soon as Morong Yu launched his soul attack, his soul force rushed into Bai Yixian's soul space. At this time, Bai Yixian was finally frightened. While quickly retreating, she saw Morong Yu's soul force quickly dissipating in her soul space. It did not immediately annihilate her soul. Although Bai Yixian did not understand why Morong Yu did not attack her soul, she breathed a sigh of relief and retreated like a meteor. But in the next moment, her complexion changed again. Morong Yu's huge soul force formed a huge net in Bai Yixian's soul space at this time. While Bai Yixian was still in shock, the heavenly net made of spiritual strength had already enveloped Bai Yixian's soul. Then, the net quickly shrank and tied up Bai Yixian's soul like a rice dumpling. Ah! Bai Yixian immediately screamed out in pain. His figure that was retreating suddenly stopped. If you dare to move again, I will kill you immediately. Muronyu's cold voice sounded in Baishian's ears, but made Baishian's body tremble, and she did not dare to move. What a joke! Her entire soul was now under Muronyu's control. As long as Muronyu's mind moved, her soul would explode. Once her soul shattered, she would die without a doubt. In the blink of an eye, the situation reversed. Give me the antidote. Muronyu sat on the chair and shouted coldly. Baishian's body trembled fiercely. First, she looked at Muronyu in horror, then took out a bottle from her storage ring and threw it to Muronyu. You eat one first. Muronyu poured out a pill and sniffed it, but did not find anything strange. But she was still not at ease. She flicked her finger and sent the pill to Baishian. This is really the antidote, Baishian was about to explain, but a tearing pain came from her soul and almost made her faint. So, she did not dare to talk nonsense and directly swallowed the pill. After a long time, Muronyu saw that nothing had happened to Baishian. Then, he swallowed the pill. Then, the power that was imprisoned in his body started to circulate and was under his control again. This drunken thousand tea and white flame shadow fragrance are really strange. They are high-quality tea leaves and high-quality drinks, but when combined together, they have such an effect. Muronyu thought in his heart. Previously, except for the power of his soul, all of his power had been imprisoned. Even the power of life was no exception. After carefully checking that there were no side effects, Muronyu gave the antidote to Yu Mengqing and the others to swallow. Although there was the power of life, it was best to avoid unnecessary trouble. At this time, Baishian suddenly said, Muronyu, you have all been cured. I will not pursue this matter. You should leave quickly. Muronyu looked at Baishian with an amused expression. Now that the initiative is in my hands, do you think we can leave so easily? Baishian's face suddenly became gloomy. She seemed to remember that Muronyu was a daring person. So, her face became gloomy, and a touch of fear flashed in the depths of her eyes. What do you want? Young master of Broken Star City, core disciple of Broken Star Sect, you have a lot of good things on you, right? Give them all to me, and maybe I will let you go. Muronyu said indifferently. Baishian immediately gnashed her teeth. Muronyu, don't go too far. Since you know my identity. Puff! Before Baishian could finish his words, his entire body suddenly split into two halves. Then, a huge axe struck the ground of the hall with a boom, creating a huge pit in the ground. At this moment, Muronyu was shocked. How dare you drug me? You deserve to die. The little girl sneered and clapped her hands as if she was swatting a fly. She didn't care at all. You killed him? Muronyu glared at the little girl. Do you want to keep him alive? Since he was going to die anyway, it was better to just kill him. I don't want to be disgusted. The little girl stared at Muronyu, not to be outdone. Muronyu held his forehead with both hands. The reason why he didn't kill Baishian was not because he was afraid of the city master of Broken Star City and the Broken Star Sect. It was because once Baishian was killed, the city master of Broken Star City would come immediately. At that time, how could he have time to plunder Baishian's treasures? But now that he had killed Baishian, he would do his best to plunder Baishian's treasures before the city master of Broken Star City arrived. So, Muronyu waved his hand and put Yu Mengqing and the others into the Hichu Luoshu. Then, he reached out his hand and put Baishian's storage ring into it. At the same time, his figure flashed and disappeared. Chapter 13:17. An incomparably huge spiritual sense spread out like a tide and instantly submerged Baishian's mansion. Then Muronyu found that the mansion was indeed covered by layers of formations and restrictions. Most of the formations and restrictions were soundproof, and so on. Apart from a few servants who weren't very strong, there weren't any other experts in the mansion. For these people, Muronyu was too lazy to find trouble with them. After the enormous divine sense swept over them, it went to find Baishian's treasure house. With Baishian's identity, he must have a lot of treasures, and he wouldn't carry all of them with him. Therefore, Murong Yu was looking for treasures. Otherwise, he would have left long ago. Found it. Murong Yu's face flashed with a touch of joy, and then his figure flashed, and he had already entered. Little Loli quickly followed after him. The little Loli didn't want to enter Hichu Luo Shu. Therefore, Murong Yu didn't force her. Anyway, the little Loli was very strong. At the same time that Murong Yu found the treasure house. In the Broken Star City Lord's mansion, a huge and extremely terrifying aura soared into the sky, enveloping the entire Broken Star City in an instant. The aura contained incomparable anger and violence, wreaking havoc in every inch of the Broken Star City. The powerful and terrifying aura suppressed the souls of countless saints, causing them to tremble and their faces to change color. Ishian is dead? Who killed my son? Bai Lin, the city lord of Broken Star City, looked at the soul jade slip in his hand that had been shattered into pieces and roared hysterically. Originally, he was cultivating in seclusion, but suddenly he felt something strange in his storage ring, and then he found that Bai Ishian's soul jade slip had dissipated. Who was so bold as to kill his son in Broken Star City? Bai Lin roared in anger, and a terrifying aura erupted from his body like a tide, directly shaking the house he was in into pieces. Then his figure flashed, and he soared into the sky, shooting toward Bai Ishian's mansion. At this time, Murong Yu entered Bai Ishian's treasure house. So many saint artifacts. Looking at the countless saint artifacts strewn across the ground, some of them were radiating with the light of a high-grade saint artifact. Immediately, Murong Yu's eyes lit up. However, before he could finish looking through the items here, an incomparably powerful aura descended upon the mansion. Murong Yu's spiritual force even saw a middle-aged man with towering rage and murderous intent striding through the air towards them. They came so quickly. Murong Yu's complexion changed slightly. Then, he waved his hand and put all the things in Bai Ishian's treasury into his Hichu Luo Shu. Rumble. At this moment, an earth-shattering sound was heard, shaking the heavens and the earth. The huge sound wave almost caused Murong Yu to fall to the ground. Then he saw that the formations and restrictions of Bai Immortal's residence had been destroyed. Then a huge fist as big as a mountain came down from the sky and smashed down fiercely. This should be the city lord of Broken Star City, Bai Lin, right? Murong Yu thought in his heart, but his figure had already rushed out of the treasure house. Little bastard, die for me. After the formation was destroyed by the punch, Bai Lin's massive spiritual force had already shrouded over. When he saw Bai Ishian's corpse, he also found Murong Yu. Although he saw that Murong Yu was only a great saint, he didn't care so much. Everyone in the mansion must die. Therefore, he roared violently, and he condensed his ultimate strength into a fist. Whoosh! Hichu Luoshu and Inyang Cauldron immediately turned into a stream of light and shot out of Murong Yu's body. Then they suspended above his head, and holy light fell down to protect him. At the same time, the angel wings appeared. Murong Yu grabbed the little lowly who was about to fight back and soared into the sky. Rumble, the terrifying power was like a huge, holy mountain pressing down. It directly crashed on top of the Inyang Cauldron and Hichu Luo Shu. With Bai Lin's undead stage strength, he couldn't cause any damage to these two treasures. But the attack of the treasures shook Murong Yu's mind. Suddenly bearing the attack of an undead stage expert, Murong Yu's mind seemed to be shattered and almost torn apart. At the same time, the overflowing damage surged into Murong Yu's body like a torrent, causing his blood and chi to churn and churn like a raging sea. At the same time, cracks began to appear all over his body. Blood splattered and scattered all over the ground. Even Murong Yu's body, which was originally soaring into the sky, directly exploded from the void. With a boom, he was blasted deep into the ground. When Murong Yu and the little lowly were blasted deep into the ground, Bai Ishian's entire mansion exploded under Bai Lin's attack and was razed to the ground. The servants in the mansion were also beaten to death. His son was killed, and the furious Bai Lin even had the impulse to slaughter the entire Broken Star City. But he didn't dare to do so unless he wanted to die. But if he couldn't slaughter the city, destroying everyone in Baishin's mansion was simply a piece of cake for him. Bah! The moment she landed, the little Loli's body exploded with a ball of holy light. It canceled out all the attack power and the shock force. But the little Loli was still very angry. Her figure flashed, and she turned into a stream of light and shot out from the depths of the ground. In midair, she chopped down with her axe towards Bai Lin. Die for me! Seeing the little Loli rush over as if nothing had happened, Bai Lin was first startled, but then he became even angrier and roared with killing intent. He violently punched out again. Suddenly, a huge fist condensed from power broke through the void and rushed in front of the little Loli in an instant. The little Loli wasn't surprised, but was happy, and the huge axe in her hand actually met it. With a pu sound, the huge fist was directly chopped in half. The little Loli's face was filled with pride. In front of the incomparably sharp axe, nothing could withstand a single blow. Moreover, the axe could ignore power. But the little Loli's pride didn't last long. The power that was chopped in half didn't stop and continued to roar, quickly strangling her. In the blink of an eye, the two powers had already fiercely bombarded the little Loli's body. The little Loli's body fiercely emitted a dazzling holy light, and an extremely violent and powerful power burst out from her body, firmly protecting her. But her whole body was still sent flying by Lin's attack. Lin was shocked. Although the little Loli had been blasted away, she had been sent flying. Although the little Loli was sent flying, he found that the little Loli wasn't injured at all. His full-powered punch was actually completely neutralized. The little Loli was basically in an invincible position, but the power in the little Loli's body clearly didn't belong to her. It was placed in her body by a powerful person. Just like the Tianming power in Muronyu's body, there was a limit to the number of times it could be used. Once the power was exhausted, the little Loli's trump card would be gone, and she would be like a fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Bai Lin obviously knew this, and only saw a sinister smile on his face as he crazily bombarded her with punch after punch. In the blink of an eye, he exploded with tens of thousands of punches, all landing on the little Loli's body. The little Loli constantly screamed and didn't have the strength to fight back, as she was continuously sent flying. But the holy light on her body was still so dazzling, as if it wasn't exhausted at all. Regarding this, Muronyu and Bai Lin couldn't help but be shocked. Muronyu was fine, as he already knew that the little Loli's background wasn't simple. But Bai Lin was shocked. But shock was shock. The hatred of killing his son was greater than the heavens. No matter what her background was, just kill her. Thus, after seeing that his continuous attacks were unable to break the little Loli's power, Bai Lin stopped attacking. Who knew when he would be able to break this shield? And after this shield, did the little Loli have any other trump cards? Thus, with a sinister smile, he stepped into the air and caught up with the little Loli, then reached out his hand, grabbing the little Loli in the air. The monstrous hand fell from the sky, and streaks of power splashed out from Bai Lin's 5 fingers, intertwining into a giant net in the air, covering the land, and binding the little Loli. The little Loli's power shield was strong, but if she was caught, no matter what trump card she had, it would be exhausted. Want to catch me? The little Loli was furious. The giant axe in his hand continuously slashed out. In an instant, this space was filled with an incomparably huge axe shadow, and the power that was attacked was directly broken by the axe. But Bai Lin was still an undead stage warrior, even if the giant axe's power was shocking. But she couldn't escape. The giant net quickly contracted and was about to bind the little Loli. The little Loli became more and more furious and began to madly attack. But Bai Lin, an undead stage warrior, was much stronger than her. Streaks of power surged out like stormy waves, and the little Loli couldn't resist. Seeing that the little Loli was about to be caught by Bai Lin, a sinister smile appeared on Bai Lin's face. But at this moment, an extremely strong and dangerous aura shrouded his heart. In an instant, All the hair on Bai Lin's body stood on end. An expert is attacking me. Bai Lin was shocked, and the power in his body surged crazily, forming a shield on the surface of his body. At the same time, his incomparably huge divine consciousness spread out. But he didn't find an expert attacking him. Rumble. But at this moment, a terrifying power that made his soul tremble rushed into his spiritual space. Soul attack. At this moment, Bai Lin finally reacted. With a scream, his extreme power rushed into the spiritual space to protect his soul. Rumble. Murong Yu's soul power exploded in Bai Lin's mind, entangling with Bai Lin's power. The overflowing power attacked Bai Lin's soul, and it was like a lonely boat in a stormy sea, about to be torn apart at any time. Whoosh! While Bai Lin was doing his best to defend against the soul attack, a black shadow descended from the sky with a terrifying aura that could destroy the world. It slammed down viciously, wanting to kill Bai Lin with brute force. A dual attack of soul and power. Bai Lin, who was shocked, finally withdrew the power that was grabbing the little lowly and used all his strength to defend. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.